Welcome to the First Things First podcast. And first things first, we need you to subscribe and leave comments letting us know what you think of the show. We're listening. I'm Nick Wright, joined by two of my favorite people, Jenna Wolfe, Chris Carter. Now, let's get the show started.
Hey everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe alongside the Hall of Famer Chris Carter. This is Nick Wright, and Super Bowl week is upon us, CC.
Absolutely. Super Bowl 52 in Minneapolis. Looking forward to a great week of shows.
You're heading out later this week?
Going to be heading out there later on, simulcasting from there.
Nice.
I'm going to miss my Batman and Robin.
What's the weather? Wait, are you going to be inside or outside? Here we go.
Oh, I'm going to be
Doppler.
inside.
Okay.
I'm going to be inside.
Okay.
Yeah, global warming has not hit Minneapolis.
And thankfully, the game's going to be played indoors.
Yes.
Or else we would be having a totally different level of analysis this week.
Yeah, we got to play indoors.
4
Matter of fact, if Minnesota didn't have an indoor stadium, we wouldn't be doing this show. Like, 'cause you wouldn't have met me.
All right, well, let's dive in. Super Bowl week is here. Minnesota getting ready for a number of humans flying into the Twin Cities. The Eagles arrived yesterday. Patriots coming in later today.
It's your boy Ron Jaworski meeting the team.
I know, love it. And fans will be filing in all week. So good news for the Patriots, as Rob Gronkowski actually practiced the last 2 days, but still remains in the concussion protocol. But the center of attention has been, will be, and is Tom Brady, looking for his 6th oversized ring. He spoke about the importance of playing in the Super Bowl.
I've never taken anything like this for granted, and I think we're all very fortunate to be in this game. It's a lot of hard work to get here. It's exciting for us as players, coaches, for our families, for our friends. And, what makes it great is when you go down there and you play great. So being a part of a couple of these losses, those are pretty tough to swallow. But I think you realize how much effort you have to put in to prepare. It's a very unique environment, unique game. And you have to be at your best. But in order to do that, you have to prepare as well as you possibly can.
All right, Cece, given the season that the Patriots have had, the way that Tom Brady started off, all the injuries this team has had, the stitches, all of it on his hand, would winning the Super Bowl be his most impressive accomplishment at this point?
I don't think so. I mean, it's nice at 40, but Tom Brady's already a made man with 5 Super Bowls. It is hard to top off on the field and off the field what Tom Brady did last year. Tom Brady could have walked off last year into the sunset and realized, wow, this is like a Hollywood ending to a script. Because not that we forgot how the season began, Tom Brady was suspended last season to start the season. And now we know through personally, his family, his mother, was going through some hard times, wasn't able to watch him play, was able to be at the Super Bowl, down 28-3 in the Super Bowl to be able to get his 5th Super Bowl. So those things right there, it's hard to go beyond that. Now, it is nice to see how he's adding to history at 40, getting his team to a 13-3 season, the #1 seed, and now playing in his 8th Super Bowl. That's all just icing on the cake for me. But last year, it's hard to top what he went through from an emotional standpoint, from a physical standpoint, and being removed from the team by the NFL. I know it's important to Tom because I've been watching the Tom versus Time. He pointed out in there, he still has the letter saved from Roger Goodell from his suspension. So this would be monumental, but what he's already done and what he overcame in the last 12 months, I think supersedes this moment.
I would have thought you could never top last year. I also thought you could never top 2007, even though they didn't win the thing. I was like, Tom Brady's the quarterback of the greatest football team I've ever seen. And then last year happens. I'm like, man, this guy's 39 years old. All the things CC mentioned, the unbelievable comeback where he played a near flawless 4th quarter and then overtime. But I'm big on longevity. I'm big on people breaking the mold as far as it really stopping me in my tracks, impressing me. And if they finish this off, I think it would be the most impressive thing he's done. And here's why. If they win this year, he will have started his career with 3 Super Bowl wins in 4 years, and then not necessarily ended his career, but he could end his career if he wanted to walk away with 3 Super Bowl wins in 4 years. He would have won back-to-back Super Bowls in years 3 and 4 as a starter, and then back-to-back Super Bowls in years 16 and 17 as a starter. I came into this year believing both of these things. Tom Brady's the greatest quarterback I've ever seen, and he's probably not going to be great this season. I think people took the second to mean I didn't believe the first. I thought he was the greatest quarterback I'd ever seen, and I was selling Tom Brady's stock start this year because forget winning the Super Bowl at 40. No quarterback had ever been above 500 at 40. If he finishes this year, he will be with a win. He will be the MVP of the league, which I believe he already is, have another Super Bowl championship, have 50% more Super Bowls wins than Joe Montana, double the Super Bowl appearances of Joe Montana, and will have done it with no Edelman, last-ranked defense for the majority of the season, the one dynamic weapon on offense, and, oh, yeah, by the way, slices his hand open 72 hours before the AFC Championship
And don't
game.
forget the emotional wrinkle. For the first time in the last couple of years, we actually saw a fracture in the infrastructure in New England. And maybe it's been there, maybe it hasn't, but it got leaked for the first time this year. And we started talking about, well, who's going to stay and who's not going to stay. So I think for all those reasons, you have to ask yourself, where do you rank this Patriots team that he's taken to the Super Bowl compared to other teams that he has brought to the Super Bowl? Is this maybe the worst team that has
Like, as far as you by that, you mean as far as like talent of the people on his team
Sure.
outside of Brady?
Yeah.
Well, I think that Brady has something too, lot like LeBron, as far as the Eastern Conference. Because if you look at the matchups, Marcus Mariota in the divisional round.
Yeah.
Blake Bortles in the championship game. So his ability to get to the Super Bowl, it worked out with this team. This is not the most talented team. Like this team, they'd have a hard time being 8-8 if Tom Brady wasn't on the team. Like they're well coached and everything, but you can't coach what he does. And you're not going to be able to replace him with the guy that's going to make Danny Amendola a starter, that's going to make Hogan a big-time player. These guys aren't. They're just players that Tom Brady is making into better than what they are. So you have to give Tom credit for that. Up and down the roster, though, with injuries, like when they started the season, they thought this was a great football team, going to be a great season. But with the injuries, I mean, that's not the most talented team. I would say probably the least talented of all the Brady teams. I'm talking about top to bottom. Now, you have to realize the first two Super Bowls, the team won those. Tom was along for the ride.
And those were very talented defenses.
Yes.
Those two Super Bowls didn't have great. This team probably has better offensive talent than certainly the 0-1 Pats. But those teams had outstanding defensive players.
Right. I think the one thing that's significant, which led to Tom's suspension, the deflation of the football, because people talk about how will this affect his career. Well, they changed the ruling on the footballs. They got a new way that they measure them, and who's able the sequence for which the footballs are taken to the field. Tom Brady, since they changed that, has been just as successful or more successful. So for me, all those things that he went through, they changed the rules. He got suspended after all these appeals and winning the Super Bowl. And the thing that's really hard to put a value on his mother. And his mother and her being sick last season and him being able to win the Super Bowl that's the first game that she attended last season, accepting that trophy from Roger Goodell, it's hard to beat that type of accomplishment.
And the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history to boot. It would have been amazing no matter how they won the game, but the way they won it. The reason I probably am leaning towards this year is something CeCe touched on. I am a guy that places almost an outsized importance on longevity for all-time greats. Because I think we do an odd thing in sports commentary, which is guys that don't play as long, we just assume they would have continued to be great.
No.
One of the reasons that I'm seemingly a man on an island when it comes to Emmitt Smith and Barry Sanders. I'm an Emmitt guy. And people are like, oh, well, Barry walked away early. I don't know what Barry would have looked like if he would have kept playing.
Right. It's the same thing with Calvin Johnson.
Calvin Johnson, another example. People are like, oh, Calvin Johnson could have had all the maybe. So I'm an Emmitt over Barry guy. I'm a Kobe over Shaq guy because of the longevity. It's one of the reasons I'm a LeBron over Jordan guy. So for Brady to be what he did at age 39 was unprecedented. for him to somehow duplicate that or be on the cusp of duplicating that,
right.
it is so remarkable to me, and he keeps setting standards that I think are going to be unapproachable. Like, as I mentioned, that Brian Tannehill went to 4 Super Bowls. He's now been to 8. Are we ever going to see another quarterback go to 5 Super Bowls when
No.
Brady's been to 8?
No.
He could win 6. CeCe said the other day, you think he's going to win 7.
Yes, I think he'll win 2. I think. Yes.
We ever going to see?
I'm not coming up with my prediction yet, but I think he's going to have 2 more trophies.
Is another quarterback ever going to win 5?
No.
Right? Like, he is lapping the second greatest in the field, and will continue to, assuming if they are able to win on Sunday.
One thing that you have to realize, too, that there's been quarterbacks very, very close to Tom in age, that being Brett Favre. Brett Favre doesn't throw the interception. That's one pass in New Orleans with the NFC Championship. They go on to the Super Bowl. Peyton Manning had a serious neck injury that required multiple surgery, but he was approaching that corner, and then he fell off a cliff. Drew Brees is right behind him at 39. So we have seen a version of this, but Tom Brady, what he's doing is very, very special.
And one of the questions that we will continue to be asked and talk about this week is going to be whether the outcome of the Super Bowl determines whether Tom Brady comes back again next year, which we will see. Welcome back to First Things First. Joining us now is Super Bowl champ Chris Canty, someone who knows a little something about the Super Bowl. How's it going,
Just a
Chris?
little something, Just a little something.
I'm sorry, I don't have my sunglasses on.
I got the bling on
this
week. You know, it's Super Bowl week.
Man, forget the Super Bowl. I don't have no Super Bowl ring, but I know you got my shoes on.
Talking about the shoes?
You're
The
wearing the exact same shoes.
Hey, listen, CeCe. Imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So I saw you with the mugshot shoes, and I was just like, you know what? I got to get on those. I got to get on those.
Because there's no chance Nick's going to dress like me.
No, but you know what?
No shot?
Come here. Nick and I are wearing the same shoes, too.
I don't know if
Check it out. Nick and I got the same shoes on.
Nick got some red-bottom Jordans on.
What are those?
Welcome, bro.
My man.
Good to see you.
Good
to see you, man.
Awesome. All right, it is Super Bowl week, and for the players involved, a chance to get asked literally every question about everything from just about everyone. Am I right, Chris Canty?
You're absolutely right, Jenna.
Besides pregame rituals and superstitions, in-game matchups will be highlighted amongst those questions, mainly Tom Brady's potent offense against that stingy Eagles defense, the one that allowed just 17 points in 2 playoff games combined. When asked about it, Tom Brady spoke about it.
They've got a great defense, as good as we faced all year, and the D-line is, I think better than any team we faced all year. Fletcher Cox is a, incredible player, but they're all really talented. They all play well together. I think they got a great scheme. Mixes in well with their coverages and what they do.
Chris, why doesn't Tom Brady's answer surprise you?
Because they always say positive things about the opponents, and then they go for the jugular every single time once they get in the game.
If they mention your name, they really respect you.
Yeah, that's
they really, they'll pull out a punter. When they mention your name, like you know that,
look
okay.
up, oh.
Yeah,
they're just trying to soften you up, butter you up a little bit. You know what that's about.
Right.
So are you saying the Patriots really believe that this Eagles defense is as good as it gets?
No, I think they have to. When you turn on the tape and you watch the way they've been playing in the postseason, you have to believe that. You look at that defensive line, what they've been capable of. Jim Schwartz, he doesn't really like to blitz. In the regular season, they had one of the lower blitz percentages in the league, 26%, and they were pressuring the quarterback on 28% of the passes. But if you look at what they've done in the postseason, they got a blitz percentage of 16%, yet they're pressuring the quarterback 35% of the passes. So the defensive line has stepped up the pressure in the postseason, and really that's where it's going to have to start. When we won the Super Bowl in 2011 against the Patriots, we had 8 quarterback hits in this game. I think the Philadelphia Eagles defensive line is going to have to live in that range if they're going to have a chance at being competitive in this ball game. During the playoffs, 19 quarterback hits. That's impressive. 19 quarterback hits in 2 games against 2 teams that are pretty good at protecting the quarterback in the Atlanta Falcons and the Minnesota Vikings. So the fact that you're able to do that, the fact that it's not just one guy, because Fletcher Cox has 4, he's leading the way, but that defensive line as a whole, they're finding ways to get to the quarterback. I think that's going to be the key for this ball game.
I think the front 7, because they got a 7-man rotation. Typically when I say the front 7, I would include the defensive line and the linebackers. This is not the best defense they faced. All right? Stats would tell you Jacksonville is the best defense they're faced. But if Jacksonville's back end and their linebackers had this front seven,
then it's the 2000 Ravens.
then we wouldn't be talking. We'd be talking about, hey, man, Tom Brady and them getting ready for 2018 season.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it would have been over with. Now, Jacksonville, they had a nice Calais Campbell. It was a nice, but they didn't have the onslaught that we talked about that Philadelphia and Jim Schwartz. They got a 7-man rotation. So for me,
At the D-line, not
Yes.
at the D-line.
7 people have played over 400 snaps. It's been well documented. No one in the National Football League puts that type of pressure and personnel on you. So if the Eagles win, those 7 guys would have had a tremendous impact on the game. I don't see a way Philadelphia winning unless they have 8 to 10 hits on Tom Brady. And that's the one thing that we've seen with Tom Brady the last couple of years. People are not able to get to him, either because of how they throw it quick or the offensive line, they give him just enough time. And that's why Tom's been so successful late in his career.
Well, and so on the D-line, so you have 7 guys playing 400 snaps, which means nobody, except for maybe Fletcher Cox, is overworked. You also have to keep in mind the Eagles, one of their strengths on offense this year was time of possession, averaging a little over 33 minutes time of possession a game. That means the defense playing less than 27 minutes a game, so they're extra fresh. But people, when we talk about how do you beat the Patriots, they, of course, talk about your team. Because there's not a lot of teams that have beaten the Patriots, only the Giants, obviously, in the Super Bowl. And when we think of the Giants beating them, we think of those star edge rushers, the guys playing next to you. You think of whether it's Justin Tucker, O.C. Umenyiora, or Michael Strahan. The guys playing the spot you played for the Philadelphia Eagles be the key to this game. It's everyone knows Fletcher Cox, they mention him. But Timmy Jernigan, who they traded for, he's been listed on the injury report. It's an important injury to monitor. Timmy Jernigan playing next to Fletcher Cox. They traded for him, then gave him a big contract. It's what Chris always talks about and you always talk about, getting pressure up the middle. Because you get pressure on the edges, Brady can step up. But get pressure up the middle where, as you guys have mentioned, undersized offensive linemen in the middle for the New England Patriots. Those are the 2 guys, Fletcher Cox and Timmy Jernigan, for the Eagles defense to be great.
And Tim Jernigan, I'm going to snatch this from you. I know that's one of your buddies. I know that's one of your teammates.
Yep.
This dude is a beast. And he's going to take it as disrespect, because this is the way defense, if they single block him, he could change the game. Now, they have to double-team Fletcher Cox. They've mentioned Fletcher Cox's name in the press conferences, so you know he will have the maximum amount of attention. And, yes, those Giants teams, those guys outside did get all the fanfare. But that game was started by the guys in the middle, the D tackle and playing on the nose. That's what created pressure. Now, to put the game away, Strahan and them came off the edge at the end of the game, but they got beat up. Their guards and their center got beat up by the Giants' interior line, and that's what led to victory.
And that's one of the things that you're going to see in this game, because the Patriots, they're going to deploy in that 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end personnel grouping. So the Eagles are going to have to match that with nickel. Now, on early downs and distances, you're going to have Timmy Jernigan and Fletcher Cox in the middle. Bo Allen will be rotating in there. But when they decide on the longer downs and distances that they need to get after the quarterback, you could potentially see them taking out one of those defensive tackles and putting in another defensive end and going with a 3 defensive end and 1 defensive tackle front in order to have more speed on the field and be able to attack that pocket. Because as you mentioned, CC, you can't double team both of those guys on the inside of that defensive line. So whoever is going to get the one-on-one, they got to go to work. They got to win that matchup, because you got to get that pressure right up the middle on Tom Brady in order to impact it.
Did you say earlier that Jim Schwartz didn't call a lot of blitz packages throughout the season?
Yeah, he's not big on blitzing.
And tell me how that changes on Sunday.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think it can change on Sunday. I think you have to rush 4 and you have to drop 7 in coverage just because of what the Patriots do. Now, if you look at the Eagles team, they're pretty good in terms of the opposing team's QBR when they're targeting running backs and wide receivers. They're 2nd and 3rd, respectively, in terms of being able to keep those guys in check. But when you look at tight ends, they're one of the worst teams in terms of opposing QBR rating when they're throwing the tight ends. They're 28th. So this is a game where Rob Gronkowski is really set up to have a big day. The Eagles and Jim Schwartz have got to have an answer for him. I don't know if it's going to be Rodney McLeod, Malcolm Jenkins, Michael Kendricks, Nigel Bradham, but between the combination of those 4 guys, they got to figure out how they're going to defend Gronk.
Well, one of the ways that maybe they could defend Gronk is if they are effective enough with the pass rush that the Patriots feel like they have to keep Gronk in the block. Like, one of the best ways to defend him could be to...
They're not going to do that. Okay? They're not going to do that. I mean, they don't do a lot of that. And they have the protection in what they call. Tom will get the ball out of his hand. So they don't do a lot of that to be able to stop people. But Philadelphia cannot win with that game plan. All right? You cannot go in against New England and say, I'm only going to rush 4. You have to come up with a plan B. Just like New England did in last year's Super Bowl, they went after Matty Ice to come back in the game. They started blitzing. Jim Schwartz, you need a curveball. You need a slider because your fastball will not be able to get it done by itself.
Good news for the Patriots. Rob Gronkowski practiced twice over the weekend. He still, however, has not cleared the concussion protocol. CC, you say you're not worried. You still think he'll play on Sunday?
No, I'm not worried because he started the activities that when the doctor releases you to start driving. He started driving 5 days ago. And now he's been released to increase his cardio, because typically in the protocol, what you're worrying about once their heart rate begins to go up, then they start getting some dizziness, start having problems with light. So once you see them on the field, they've been allowed to advance in the program that they can get their heart rate up. So when you see them on the practice field actually running, you know that they're very, very close to being out of the protocol.
Also, given where he is in the protocol now, we do have reason to believe, if not know, that if this had happened in the divisional round, where you don't have 2 weeks between games, it could have kept him out for the week. But with the extra week before the Super Bowl, he should be able to play. He is, Chris Canty mentioned it earlier, the weakest spot on the Eagles' defense is their defense of tight ends. So he's a key player in every game, particularly in this one. I also expect him to play.
All right, finally, Tom Brady had those 12 stitches removed from his hand. There was never much doubt about him playing in the Super Bowl. And after being limited in practice on Thursday, Brady was a full participant on Friday. Chris Carter, should we expect Brady's hand to have any impact whatsoever in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, hell yeah, it's going to have an impact on the Super Bowl. He's going to be carving them up, throwing the ball. I mean, he's holding the ball in his hand the whole time.
The injury to his hand.
There is no injury.
It's
they took
done
the stitches out.
That's the question.
I mean, the concern was last week, especially playing in the elements. And after I saw him warming up, and then Tony Romo did a great job of talking about how he went to the practice facility and was throwing the ball for over an hour, even before he came out and did his traditional warm-up. So it lets you know that he felt comfortable enough to be able to throw the ball that much. Because I thought the hand, if it had been closer to the top of the thumb, then I thought he might have a problem of potentially reopening the stitching. But it wasn't. It was closer to the bottom of the thumb and the palm of the hand. So when you actually are throwing a football, the top part of your thumb is on the ball. His hand is cut down here, so it was above where he was really gripping and releasing the ball. And when you throw the ball, your thumb, the top part, and your index finger throw the ball like that. So, no, I don't expect it to play a role in the Super Bowl. And in last week's game, after I saw him throwing, what I was more concerned about, could he reopen it when he landed?
When he landed, and that's why they were very cautious with him at practice last week, was while the way CC describes it, he wasn't going to reopen it by throwing the ball. If he bangs his hand on another player's helmet again, if he falls down, if it reopens, you then start the process over.
Right. Also, you have to watch the skin that's on your hand. It's like the skin on your feet. It's very, very tender, and it's slow to heal, one of the slowest healing parts of your body, so it takes some time.
So the fact that those stitches are removed, he now can practice fully, which is something he obviously wants to do.
Football golf skin expert.
Football golf skin expert. Weather. Don't forget weather.
Yeah, I use it when I have to.
Doppler.
Full disclosure,
Doppler
I'm really bad and squeamish with that kind of stuff.
Just stitches, Jen?
Just
Remind me to tell you the story about when the doctor left a stitch in my arm.
I realize now as soon as I said it.
Didn't someone tell you that?
To the other side of this one Eagle we haven't discussed in a while. They couldn't get it. Somebody couldn't hold his bag. Come on. We haven't talked about Carson Wentz. This is ridiculous. He was the talk of the league and among the it's like limping down the stairs.
He's got a boot on.
He's still limping, holding that thing. Yeah.
That's why he's limping. He's got a boot on.
Jenna said someone should hold his bag, but go ahead, Jenna.
He's among the MVP leaders when he went down with an ACL tear in Week 14. Let's watch it again, how he's struggling with the bag. And watching from the sideline hasn't always been easy on the second-year quarterback. Take a listen.
There's that part of me, that human element that wants to be out there, without a doubt. As a competitor, I kind of set out with that and with this goal in mind to get here, and not only to get here but to win this thing. And obviously it looks different for me, but the team is still plugging along, and I couldn't be happier for them.
All right, what would it mean, CC, for Wentz if the Eagles win the Super Bowl without him?
That would mean a lot more pressure on him the rest of his career. If they win the Super Bowl with Nick Foles, yeah, they got most of those wins with Carson Wentz, but the type of pressure and you have to realize what the Philly fan base, it's not no normal fan base now. I mean, the word fan comes from the derivative of the word fanatic. In Philadelphia, they got that thing on spades. All right? That's what they do. So I believe it would be harder for him if he doesn't. It was just like Phil Simms winning the Super Bowl with the Giants. If Hostetler had won that Super Bowl and Phil Simms hadn't won a Super Bowl, what would Phil Simms' career be?
If people don't know, so Phil Simms won the Super Bowl for the Giants in '86. Then in '90, Simms got hurt and Hostetler came in and won it. But Simms already had won a Super Bowl with the team, if people don't remember the history of it.
I just believe it's a lot more pressure put on him. I would like the organization to win. But for Carson Wentz in particular, it's not beneficial if the Eagles do win without him.
I'm going to take it a step further, and I don't know if you're going to like this, CC, but I would feel like if I'm the Eagles, given exactly what Chris said, that if Carson Wentz is healthy, which we don't know if he will be, but if he's healthy by training camp, I would have Nick Foles on the trade market. I wouldn't want Carson Wentz coming off an ACL, having the guy sitting behind him be the first quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl in the city. I understand. Now, you also, by the way, could probably get a lot for him if he does win the Super Bowl. But I think when Carson Wentz is the future of your franchise quarterback, the guy that was looking like the league MVP, to all of a sudden have the next game he plays, have the backup quarterback maybe be the most popular Eagle of all time, I think that's unfair.
Even if they win, Carson Wentz will not be the most popular.
No, Nick Foles.
Nick Foles.
Okay.
Nick Foles will not be the most popular, even if they win. They will find some other narrative, but it also, Howie Roseman, it speaks to the type of team he put on the field. It speaks to Doug Peterson, the type of coach that he is. The defense, we talk about Schwartz and that 7-man rotation. We will deflect from Nick Foles. Nick Foles played amazing last week, over 300 yards passing, but we gave a lot of credit to other people along the way. So I don't think it would be that extreme. I'm not going to trade him because he won the Super Bowl if I don't feel like that's the absolute best thing for my team. I know he's under more pressure, but moving him to another team does not relieve the pressure from Carson Wentz. Like, I would keep him right there. If it was the best thing for my team, I wouldn't trade him based on worrying about the feelings of my star quarterback.
The him that Cece's there, I just want to make clear. I was talking about trading Nick Foles, not talking about trading Carson Wentz. I don't want people to say wouldn't think we're talking about that. I just the extra burden on him. Go ahead,
I don't know.
Jenna.
I have such a hard time. I mean, the Philadelphia didn't want Nick Foles even when he was their quarterback. I mean, we saw what he did in those couple of games before last week's game. I mean, he was just struggling to find, and he had one good game, and all of a sudden the conversation turns very quickly to, hey, if Carson Wentz isn't ready to go, maybe he loses this job if Foles plays well in the Super Bowl?
I don't know. No, I don't think it's that he loses the job. No. I think it's the added. You talk all the time about.
He got a better chance of losing his leg.
I think. I mean,
he's going to have to carry 3 people's bags.
Jenna, you talk all the time about the Philly fans, the Philly media, how it's a particular market.
Yes.
And you talk all the time about the players being asked about something, about distractions, about things like that. The point that I'm making is, if the guy sitting behind you has won the biggest game in franchise history, and it's not a situation where you've won one of them as well. In fact, it's a situation where you've never even played in a playoff game. I think that could be hard for any quarterback to deal with. I understand Chris's point that if you have 2 good quarterbacks or at least a competent backup, you don't want to move them unless you get a great value. I get all of that. I just think it's a lot of added pressure, as you mentioned. If Nick
It's not added pressure with a guy being there that's not as talented as you. I mean, these NFL players, they don't think like that. Like, the day that Carson got hurt, you said their season's over. I'm not trying to bring up that point, but
no,
you talked about the difference in their talent level.
Totally agree.
So what changed?
Well, I don't know. Then if you don't agree with me, then I'm a little confused on what you said at the beginning. Because at the beginning of something you said, if they win, so flush it out for me so I better understand.
No. As an organization, they won a Super Bowl without you. It lets you know they have a great team around them. So their expectation for Carson Wentz would be to win a Super Bowl, like to finish out what he started in the 2017 season. Those would be the normal goals for someone who is a star like Carson Wentz.
So that expectation and that pressure doesn't change no matter who his backup quarterback
Nick Foles, we're not worried about Nick Foles. Like, as a professional, you don't worry about guys like him. Like, you don't get concerned. You don't get to where you are and be worrying about people like Nick Foles. I think that's a non-issue.
Back here on First Things First and the controversy surrounding Michigan State. ESPN published a report of a, quote, pattern of widespread denial, inaction, and information suppression surrounding sexual assault within the athletics program at MSU, as well as on the campus as a whole. The report shed light on rape accusations and charges of violence against women by former basketball players and a graduate assistant. It goes on to detail at least 16 football players accused of sexual assault or violence against women. Both football coach Mark D'Antonio and basketball coach Tom Izzo say they have no plans of stepping down from their positions. This in the wake of the university being caught up in the gymnastics scandal surrounding former Michigan State doctor Larry Nassar. This is a conversation to be had, and I'm going to kick the conversation off, start it this way. I don't believe we can talk about this in broad terms. I don't think we can say sexual harassment and sexual allegation is a vague thing that's just sort of sweeping the nation. I think we have to get into specifics, which is why I'm glad that we are talking about MSU, for example, this morning. This is happening to specific people. This is happening to our sisters and our mothers and people we know and people we care about. And nothing changes if nothing changes. That's just what this has come down to, and that means accountability. Somebody or a group of people have to be held accountable or nothing changes, or this is just a conversation that keeps going on, or these are just allegations that we keep hearing about. And until someone is held responsible, this is just a continuing and ongoing conversation. And I don't care how successful your organization is, how much money the university is making, how many awards or accolades or, how big things have gotten. It does not justify this happening one time, just one instance of it. And I do understand that people will say, well, this is bad for business. Well, it doesn't matter at this point, and we've gotten to the point where it really can't matter. And let's not forget that in addition to the allegations against the former players at MSU, Michigan State University harbored the single worst sexual abuser in the history of this country in Larry Nassar. They let him stay there, knowing there were reports out against him, and they let him continue to do what he did until very recently. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that is happening at other universities, other big universities across the country today.
Well, of course not. Baylor. It happened to Baylor last year. So we shouldn't be shocked. We had Baylor 2017. We got Michigan State 2018. We see through corporate America with the Me Too, I have to be honest. I'm very, very happy because a day of reckoning is coming, not only for young people, but for women. At some point, we have to decide that women are a valuable asset to our society. And I'm really disappointed in parents, in educators, and in coaches of what they're put here to do. As a parent, God trusted me with 2 kids, and the least thing that I could do is listen to them. So to have these kids report these things to their parents, and their parents dispute the children and what they're telling them. It's not like kids just make up stuff like this. So when are we going to support our kids? When are we going to support our women? When is enough enough? And to me, I'm very, very happy there's a day of reckoning coming, also as far as corporate America. And you could believe that every day thousands of men wake up and they are terrified if their name is going to be released as finally being involved in this. And I just think that we have to realize what's going on. And we have just become so cavalier about sexual assault and how we're going to treat women, and we're the kids telling the truth. That to me, I'm glad that these things are happening. I believe they should be unveiled. I believe that the people should be penalized. But even after that, what are we personally going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? And for me, it's been about being a great role model, setting a great example for my son and my daughter, but also listening to them enough that they would have my ear. But I'm really disappointed when the kids cried out for help, and that being either to professors, either to their teammates, and especially to their parents, that the parents didn't come running to try to help out their kids, and instead of validating their stories, they actually didn't believe them at all. So I'm glad something is happening. I believe this is just the beginning of the correction, not only from a business standpoint, because there's still companies out there that are hiding people that have sexually assaulted people for years and gotten away with it. There's still sports programs hiding people that have gotten away with this for years. And enough is enough.
And you mentioned the parties that victims went to for help and didn't receive it, and one that went on stage was the police. It is really, really tough. Like, I walk around with like all this privilege, right? It's like straight white male privilege, and I'm very aware of the white part of it. I'm very aware of the orientation part of it. I think I've done for a long time a very bad job of being aware of the benefits and advantages that come along with being a guy. Over the last 6 months, I've tried to do a better job of talking to women close to me, some of the closest women in the world to me, and the number of them that either had dealt with a violent sexual assault or a very close call outnumbers the ones who said, no, I've never had to deal with it. I had my friend Jenna Wolf say, almost in passing when this came up a while ago, that, listen, I've just known when I decided I wanted to go into sports that sexual harassment was just something I'm going to have to deal with, just going to have to figure out how to deal with it. And
it's also the advice that Jenna has given thousands of others, women, young women in this business, as far as how to approach it. Like, there is a method, to going about this and how to be successful at it. And it's not acquiescing to the offers. It's being a professional, being better than the competition, being above reproach, but realizing in this, it's real. Like, you're going to face these things, and you need to have a game plan for what you're going to do.
And it's just so, where Chris says he's glad the moment of reckoning is happening. I am glad that in 2018, we might be finally starting to approach allowing women equal protection under the law and equal citizenship. I'm glad we are getting closer to that. Where I'm disgusted and disheartened is, I understand right now, and for very good reason, we are focused on Michigan State, but it feels to me, when I watch this from outside of sports, as the world as a whole, that wherever we shine the spotlight, what we find is some horrible male actors acting as predators, and people in positions of power enabling or allowing for reasons that are beyond my comprehension. And Chris brings up the parents. Like, I'm a parent. I don't know what you do if your kid comes to you and says something happened to me. Because I think as a parent, you want to believe that it didn't happen.
Yeah, I know exactly what we're supposed to do. We see too many examples of what not to do. We call the police, all right, and we start an investigation, all right? It's time for us to stop listening to people that are crying out for help. And it starts...
Start listening. You said stop.
Start listening to people that are crying out for help. And, like, everyone is reading all this information, everyone's seeing anything, but who's actually going to do anything? And the way that you can have an impact is in your circle. Like, with my kids, with the kids who I'm role models for, the kids who I teach. Like, I hope that I have been an example of how a man should act in all these different situations. And I believe that that's at the beginning of it as parents. Now, we're not responsible for people being pedophiles and things like that.
Of course.
But if we're not going to listen to our kids, if we're not going to start listening to our kids after hearing some of the reports that we heard.
Right. We also have to create a culture that allows women to be comfortable enough to say something and not fear that it's going to get swept under the rug or forgotten. I was full-blown harassed in my first job in this business, and I was terrified. I had worked so hard to land my first job that I felt that if I said anything to anyone, and this was by my boss, that if I said anything to anyone, that it was going to somehow deter me from moving forward. I believed that. I'm telling you now, as someone who, I can't even believe that I thought it then. It was something I truly, truly believed back then. It affected me to a point where I didn't know if I should stay in the business or not. I plowed through and I moved on, and I was very successful, and I was very lucky, and I met with other instances of it. But to this day, I think back on how things would have changed if I felt comfortable enough to say something to someone as a young person just starting out in this business. And I fully understand that when the culture is not created, where there is an open conversation, where people are allowed to say something not just to their parents, but to anyone, that they will be met with someone who will
listen. And that they'll be believed.
Believed.
And they will be believed. That's why I brought up the police, because it seems like in a lot of these instances, if a woman brings forward allegations, she is the one that is then investigated, so that they will be believed. And then for women that aren't dealing with felony assault, but are dealing with a level of harassment that might not be a criminality, but is improper in the workplace, that they will not be expected to deal with it because that's part of the job.
Right.
That we almost have glorified, like if you watch the show Mad Men, like the era of like guys drinking at work and then just slapping the secretary on the behind, and just that's like a wink and a nod. And the idea that it's just like, oh, you work in the food service industry. Well, obviously that's so going to.
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Locker
well,
rooms,
you work in Congress. Well, listen, you're gonna. And what's so scary to me is what we're yet to see is a really high-profile person in an industry have the spotlight shined on them, and then they're the only one. It's like, oh, one morning news anchor. So then it's every network. Oh, one congressperson. Then it's a half dozen. One Hollywood executive. Then it's a third of Hollywood. It seems to be rampant everywhere.
I think it's a societal question that we, as a society, what are we going to continue to accept? 9/11 happened. We made some drastic changes. You know what we said? Our theme then? If you see something, say something. Now, what's wrong with that as far as sexual predators, sexual assault? Like, what's wrong with that? If you see something, you should say something. If you're being violated as a kid, I hope you can find someone that has an ear to hear your voice. And I'm so happy that the day of reckoning is coming. And there's a bunch of people out there now still hiding people that have sexually assaulted people and still covering stuff up. And God, I so hope that you are revealed and brought out into the light, which everyone else, so that we can all learn, so that we can get better as a society. Because that's really the problem.
Right.
We don't listen to our kids. We don't take women seriously. And as a man in this society, I'm not proud. Because in all these situations, there was a man or men that could have stood up and said something. And when a man stands up and says something, it's different than anyone else. But we're not doing that.
And for the guys out there, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, I know the majority of guys out there watching, they're not predators. They're not harassers. I would challenge those, and I challenge myself as well. When you hear guys laughing about things that you're like, I would never do that. But you're there, and they're your friends, they're your colleagues. There's one thing to not engage in it. It's another thing to actively have the uncomfortable conversation like, whoa, hold on. What'd you say? Why do you think that's okay? Like, it's tough. It's tough as guys it's easier to just be like, I don't want to hang out with him anymore. And to me, I feel
it's criminal the other way. All right? It's criminal. Like, we've seen enough. See something, you should say something.
I will end this the way we started it. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And we are starting to see that, and it's going to be a long time before we get to even close to the end of it. But the last couple months have set the stage for what is to come. We will leave it there for now. Hey, that guy, Tom Brady. Monday, he cut his weekly radio appearance on WEEI short because the host of another show on the station had referred to his daughter as, quote, an annoying little pissant. That host has been suspended by the station, and some are calling for him to be fired. Tom Brady is not among those people, saying he does not want the host fired, adding, quote, we all have careers and we all make mistakes. Nick, what was your reaction to this?
All right, so the reaction initially to the comment by the radio host. Obviously, it's an awful thing to say about a kid, It's a 5-year-old kid. I also, though, listen to the audio. This is, and I try to think of myself, put myself in other people's positions. This is a young broadcaster on live radio on someone else's show, it sounded like, or where he is the sidekick on the show. The lead host seems to say, hey, what'd you think of the Tom versus Time? That's what this was in reference to. And the first show opens with Tom on the phone. And you hear his daughter, who's just a year older than my daughter, saying, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy.
All normal.
At 100%.
Goes on all day.
Of course. And the kid, who doesn't have a 5-year-old kid, says, I mean, the show opens with his kid, this annoying little pissant, trying to get him like that. He should be in trouble. He should be suspended. If Brady went hard on him and said, no, I'm not coming back on that radio station as long as he's employed by that radio station, that effectively ends this young man's career. Now, I'm not an enormous fan of EEI. I'm not an enormous fan of the way they do radio and some of the things their hosts say on other shows on that network, including the show that Brady joins a lot. But I'm glad we are in a culture where everyone calls for people's jobs. On Twitter, on TV, it's always fire this guy, fire that guy.
Yeah.
And this young guy, I don't know anything about him. Maybe he's a bad guy. Maybe he's a good guy who made a mistake. I applaud Tom Brady for not beheading him in the street. He could have ended this guy's career. Now, maybe this guy will end his career on his own terms. But I think Brady was kind in this spot. And I give Tom Brady credit for that.
If you're going to use climate as a, we're in this climate where you say something, you lose your job and whatnot. We're in the same climate where anyone that's done this job more than 5 minutes has to know a couple things. One, kids are off limits. There's nothing good can come out of saying anything. I watch the same Tom Brady. Listen, that kid, my kids are annoying. I will just go ahead and say it. Mommy.
But we're allowed to say that about our own kids.
Our own kids.
Yeah, that's not the way things used to be.
Of course.
I mean, society used to be a lot different.
But that's where we are right now.
Okay.
Like, I would never say that about your kid. I just wouldn't, especially not in a public domain.
But let me tell you something.
Yeah.
If you're a public figure, Tom Brady's professional life has been totally private. But he merchandised that and sold it to Facebook. He put those cameras there. So for him, as a public figure, Tom Brady opened himself up. Now, I think it's amazing to let us see what he does. It looks like all the other great players that I've seen. But as a public figure, the reason why you don't have your kids taking photographs of them and you don't have them involved in interviews because you don't want them to be part of the public. But when you do a documentary and you have cameras all around, they're going to pick up stuff. So Tom Brady's just like anyone else. So for me, he opened himself up. Facebook, when he did that, you're opening yourself up for all types of criticism. Now, the guy didn't say anything that was incriminating. He could have had a little more class, and especially knowing that Tom Brady is a guest and how they do the program at WEEI and how it's always slanted to the Patriots. I know this guy didn't think this was going to be a good thing. So, Tom, it was nice that he didn't have to do that because it's a young guy. But when you sell something that make your life a public, for public display, you open yourself up, and that's what he did. He opened himself up to his family, and there's going to be more things said about Tom because we're going to know more about Tom.
And Jenna, you mentioned if you do this for 5 minutes, I want to let you know from a guy that did local radio for a long time. Local radio stations, shows across America in major markets. They don't follow the rules on clearing sound. They don't follow all the FCC rules. You're on a
trying to get
show.
started.
They're trying. There are so many things. While I don't think there was ever anything about someone's kid, there are so many things that the moment I said them, I was like, oh, God, please don't let someone be rolling on that. That you want to pull back, but you can't.
Totally understand that. But you also have to know that they're in bed with the Patriots, and they have this relationship none of the other local radio stations in town have.
Right.
And that is a coveted relationship that you want to hold on to dearly and cherish and mold and, turn into something. So you're right. Maybe you don't always have the right decisions or the great conscience to know whether you say something good or not about kids. You do know that you do not talk about in any disparaging way.
That's why he got suspended, right?
And I agree. And I don't think he should be fired. And I really appreciate the way Tom Brady handled it. I just thought and think kids are off limits.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
100%.
All right, let's move on. So, speaking of, I was playing ball with
You and Nick got some bad A kids.
No, I. Listen,
okay? Now suspend me.
You'll appreciate
Them mugs
this.
is B-A-D.
Okay, you know what?
Goodness gracious.
Okay.
All caps, exclamation.
Jenna was playing with one of her bad kids
So I was playing with my 4-year-old yesterday, and I threw her the ball, and she caught it, but she dropped it as she was falling to the ground. And while I felt bad saying this, I told her, hey, Harper, that wasn't a catch. And it didn't go well. So after years of discussion, thank you, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is revisiting the catch rule, much of it stemming from a play in which Steelers tight end Jesse James was ruled to have dropped a potential game-winning touchdown against the New England Patriots. And then another overturned touchdown by Kelvin Benjamin a week later. Goodell discussed his concern on The Herd yesterday. Take a listen.
I'm not just somewhat concerned, I am concerned. We just had 5 Hall of Fame receivers and several coaches come in just 2 weeks ago to focus on the catch-no-catch rule. You want there to be clarity from an officiating standpoint, a coaching and a player standpoint. They know what it is, what it isn't. I think here you might have clarity in a large element of it, but then what happens is it's not the rule that people really want.
So last week, Goodell held a meeting with a handful of Hall of Fame receivers and coaches to discuss, and our very own Chris Carter was one of them. So, CZ, if you will, take us into that meeting and give us a little perspective on what was discussed and how it was all brought to.
And if I may tell the audience real quick, if you guys were watching a few Wednesdays ago and we were kind of cagey about it, we're like, Chris has to go. It's an important meeting. That's what the meeting was. That's where it was. So it was 2 Wednesdays. It was 2 weeks ago tomorrow. Go ahead.
For NFL fans, they should be very, very happy if you enjoy watching the game, because what they're trying to do is simplify it and make it better for the fans so that almost every aspect of the game fans understand, and they understand it enough that they know what they're watching. When they're watching high school football, they realize the rules are different. Watching college football, they realize the rules are different. They realize that we should have a level of expertise and professionalism in catching the ball that should be more difficult than college or high school. So the conundrum in doing that is either through verbiage, and the hardest part is how do you survive the ground. That's the hardest part that Bill will try to get through. People think that you shouldn't have to survive the ground. The ground is actually the surface that you're playing on, so it's not as if you're elevated above the ground. It is a huge element to playing football. But for our fans, and there be such different views on what was a catch, because I know what a catch is, like it's been explained, but I adopted all the rules of surviving the ground. People, they think they know what a catch is, but they don't believe in all the rules. If you believe in the rules as far as surviving the ground, these replays become a lot easier. That right there, Kelvin Benjamin, he just got possession of the ball, so his left foot was off the ground. We watched video after video after video. Jesse James, he was falling. Bill Cowher and myself had a huge discussion and debate on, he thought that was an athletic move. And I told him, man, any guy can get knocked off a bar stool. Falling is not an athletic move. So we went back and forth, back and forth. Roger is very concerned about the fans and their inability to understand the game in real time. Now, we also know that technology, even though it is our friend, it hurts in the replay because it reveals so much in so many slow frames that it's really hard for a guy in real time, a referee, to get, because he doesn't have that look. He's making it right now. It's a bang-bang play, and the refs are doing a better job of it. But I think some of the verbiage, some of the language will be changed, and I believe as far as surviving the ground, that will probably be the biggest difference in the new rule change.
I know that you don't know this for certain, but in your gut, if the Jesse James play happens next year, that play specifically. The Kelvin Benjamin one's different because that was about whether or not his foot was on the ground once he had control. But Jesse James, there's no question if he was inbounds, out of bounds. It was all about going to the ground and whether he survived the ground. In your gut, will the Jesse James play be a touchdown next year?
I mean, I hope not, but we're still in the preliminary stages. It still has to be tweaked. Like, I hope not, because the ball, not only did he go to the ground, but the ball moved. It's not a matter of crossing the plane because he didn't have possession. You know, he didn't have the ball, a foot, or one body part and time. He didn't have all those things. So it's irrelevant to me that the ball, when his left hand comes off the ball, when he goes over the end zone, see his left hand come off the ball moved. So he actually benefited from the ground.
What can be tough in that spot, and I just wonder if this is one of the things, I don't know if it was brought up in the meeting or not, so you tell me. What's tough for fans in this spot is if you're a running back, the play's over the moment right there. The moment the ball crosses the plane, we see guys all the time on running plays dive over the top of the pile.
One thing we're trying to do, too, is a lot like New England. We're trying to stop guys from reaching for the pylon. Those are bad football fundamentals. And we're not going to reward someone in professional football for bad football fundamentals. New England teaches this. Catch the ball, tuck the ball away. Do not extend for the goal line. And realizing that it is more complicated once you go to the ground. So we're not going to make it easier to catch the football, and we're not going to compromise what we believe is the toughest. It's the toughest way to catch a ball is pro football. We're not going to make it easier. We're just going to try to make fans understand it better so when they see it in real time, they know actually what the difference is.
With 5 Hall of Famers in that meeting, did everyone want the rule changed?
I'm not going to say, like, if they want the rule changed.
Do you want the rule changed?
What I want is irrelevant. What I want is fans to be able to enjoy the skill of catching the ball. But what I'm not going to compromise making it easier. All right? It's the National Football League. Guys are being paid a lot of money. This football is the largest football built in the world. They partnered with Wilson. This is what we've decided to use. This ball without a stripe, like college, becomes even harder. The CFL, it's smaller. High school, the ball is smaller. So we have decided this is what we're going to play with. And if we're going to keep playing with this football, catching it and the fans understanding what's a catch, what not is a catch, becomes very, very important. So I think it's premature to say what I want. I think what's going to happen is fans will be pleased with the game that they see. If fans are pleased with what they see, I'll be happy because the game that I love will continue to grow.
Earlier this season, we all headed to Columbus for the big game between Penn State and Ohio State. CC was kind of a big deal on campus.
Pep makes the show.
As was fellow OSU alum and Hall of Famer Orlando Pace. You can see them both right here. And joining us live from Minneapolis is Orlando Pace. Hey, Orlando, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
We're good.
We are great. Thank you so much for getting up and hanging out with us this morning. So I'll start off with this. You and the Rams, greatest show on turf. You guys faced off against Tom Brady in Super Bowl 36. Did you ever think he would still be playing at this level 16 years later?
You know what? I didn't. Obviously, when we played him in Super Bowl 36, he was just a backup quarterback. We went into that game thinking, he's a backup quarterback. We thought we were going to go ahead and finish it. But we actually started that dynasty, that Patriots dynasty. It was a tough game. We kind of ran out of time there towards the end. But, that's where his legacy really started in the NFL. And it's amazing what he's done for 16 years to play at that level. And it's really incredible to watch.
So you mentioned that Tom Brady at the time was a backup quarterback, and I'm not at all trying to compare Nick Foles to Tom Brady, but Nick Foles right now is a backup quarterback. You obviously played in 2 Super Bowls. One was against Steve McNair, who that year might have won the MVP. I know was an MVP caliber player at quarterback, and then a game against what you called a backup quarterback. What's the difference was there a difference in the team's fine focus, attention to detail, anything going into the 2 different games, given the caliber of quarterback, at least what you thought was the caliber of quarterback in each of them?
Well, it's a mindset. That year at Super Bowl 36, we had an opportunity to play the Patriots earlier that year, and we won the game. And kind of going, we were heavy favorites going into that game, and with the backup quarterback and our confidence, I wouldn't say we took it for granted, but we did go out, we played our game. We, obviously had a good game plan against us, and then, like I said, time just ran out against us. I hate talking about that Super Bowl a little bit, only because, obviously it's tough to recover. Even years later, it's still, you're still a little bitter as a player.
Well, Orlando, you've gone on to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, one of my teammates forever, also a former Buckeye. Let's talk about from a strategy attack standpoint. Since you don't want to relive those Super Bowl memories, I can understand that. Everyone talks about the defensive front of the Philadelphia Eagles and their ability to have a 7-man rotation. What type of problem does that create, not only for Tom Brady, but for you as an offensive lineman?
Well, obviously, as an offensive line, in preparation for that week, Chris, you got to prepare for those 7 guys, and the thing that'll be difficult is when later in the game when those guys are bringing those guys with fresh legs in, and as an offensive lineman, you blocking those guys, and you got another guy coming in on 3rd down with fresh legs. That makes a difference in that 4th quarter in trying to put pressure on Tom Brady. So I think with the Eagles, it gives them flexibility to try to move that pocket. I mean, put pressure on Brady and have him move in the pocket a little bit. But, obviously it'll be a tough challenge because that offensive line, the Patriots offensive line did a great job against Jacksonville last week in that 4th quarter when they had some beast up front as well.
Orlando, I want to go back to talking about Nick Foles for a second. A lot of questions surrounding which Nick Foles we're going to see. The Nick Foles who took over for Carson Wentz in those few weeks after he went down, or the Nick Foles that was lights out in the championship game. There's a lot of people that are going to be asking him a lot of questions. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of nerves. Do you think Nick Foles can make enough plays to get this done on Sunday?
Well, I think it depends on how he manages this week and if this moment isn't too big for him. Obviously, with the Patriots, they've been in this position many times before, but this is the first time for Nick Foles, and he has to go out and play the same way he played last week against the Vikings to have success. If he plays that way, they have a great chance of winning, but he can't let the moment overwhelm him of being here in Minneapolis in the Super Bowl.
All right, Orlando, I feel badly because I made you talk about a bad Super Bowl memory, so now I'm going to try to make up for it by asking you about a great Super Bowl memory. The year you guys won the Super Bowl, I do believe in the divisional round you beat my good friend and partner Chris Carter in order to get to the conference championship game. Yeah, no bitterness on that side of the table at all. But then in that game, it's a classic game. I was fortunate. I was young, but I was at that football game between the Rams and the Titans. I know what I was thinking, Orlando, watching Steve McNair drive the field at the end of the game. You're an offensive lineman. You're powerless in the moment. You're trying to win your first championship. Can you tell me the emotions you're going through watching that final drive? You're on the sideline, Dick Vermeil's there, and then as you see Kevin Dyson extend, can you just walk me through all the emotions during the drive, and then once you realize, oh, he's short and we're world champions?
Wow. Once you look at that final drive, Nick, you see, obviously Steve McNair, and it just seemed like the Patriots with Eddie George. The Titans with Eddie George. They seemed like they got stronger during that drive. Eddie was running the ball. Steve was like Superman. We couldn't get him down to the ground. So every play, you're literally living and dying with every play. But he battled, and they were battle tested. And that last play, I'm on the sideline, and I'm just looking to see if he got in. But our defense, Mike Jones, did a great job making that tackle a yard away from those guys, tying it up and going into overtime.
Orlando, thanks again for joining us. I'm going to take you back to your 12-year career with the Rams, the resurgence of the L.A. Rams. Like, what has it done for that community? And also, what has it done for the alumni base that is split up? Half of you guys played in St. Louis. The other half played in Los Angeles or Anaheim. What has it done to galvanize that organization? Seeing this bright young coach, they got a good quarterback, they got Todd Gurley. It seems like there was a great amount of unity that was brought back to this organization this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And anytime as alumni, and Chris, you know this, when your pro ball club does well, it makes you feel good. You can wear your apparel, you can do all that. So I can wear my Rams apparel and all that. But obviously in the offseason, I got a chance to go out and spend some time in L.A. with Sean and his football mind. He's so bright, and I knew he would do great things this year and develop golf and that offense. And they were incredible this year. I love to see the turnaround, and I look to see bigger and better things from them, because they're such a young team and they're a talented team. So I look forward to seeing great things from them in the future.
Orlando, now since you're in the Hall, so now everyone makes you an expert. So it's like you have a vote to be able to put people in. I know in talking to you privately, a guy that both of us really respect. Now, the wide receiver list is stacked. They got Randy Moss on the list for the first year. They got T.O. on the list for the third year. Now, you know, in being through this process, Isaac Bruce is definitely a Hall of Famer. What's your feelings about Ike and his chances of eventually getting into the Hall and joining you and I as teammates?
Well, obviously, hopefully it's this year, but I got an up-close personal view of his career. You know, my locker is right next to his, so I know what type of effort he put in. I know what type of pro he was in his career and what type of teammate he was. And obviously, he is Hall of Fame worthy, and I can't wait till he put on that gold jacket and get that bus someday. Hopefully it's this year. If not, whenever he does it, I'll be the first one there to hug him and congratulate him and be extremely proud of him.
Orlando, I'm putting you on the spot. Best pass rusher you ever faced?
Wow, it's tough. People ask me that all the time, and I never want to give defensive linemen credit. But, you know, they're all tough. And, you know what I mean? Somebody will be at home like, yeah, I knew I was the toughest guy. No, but, you know, they're all tough. And you know, I would have to, you know, there's so many guys that early on in my career that gave me challenges, but I can honestly say I got them all back once I got a little older and started playing really good football. So I don't want to give anybody that much credit.
We need a name, Orlando. We need a name, buddy. We need a name.
I know. There's some guys. No, there's some real guys. You know, there's some guys that like the, you know, obviously the Bruce Smiths of the world, the Chris Domans of the world, those guys that were veterans when I played.
You know you better mention the Hall of Famers or you'll be in trouble.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. So, hey, Chris, that's what I go to every time. I got to mention the Hall of Famers. Well, they were a challenge, but, yeah, they're also a Hall of Famer, too. So,
if you don't want to give a guy credit, we can just go the other way. Who's the most overrated, overhyped bum you ever pancaked right out of the stadium? Give me a name there.
Oh, no, there's some names. No, there's some real names in there, too. But I don't want to disclose that either.
All right, so here's a thing that is, I guess, hotly contested in some quarters, not amongst me. I watched Ohio State in the late 90s. I saw a man who set the record for pancake blocks, who should have won the Heisman, Danny Werfel. Danny Werfel, come on. So I saw that, and then I saw you go on to instantly become the best left tackle in the NFL. So I have a feeling on this question, but I'm going to ask you, who's the best NFL player Ohio State's ever produced?
Easy now.
Ooh, that's tough, man. There's so many great players, and Chris, you know this. And, you know, obviously, the best NFL player. Is that a setup question between you and Chris? You know, Chris Carter. I'm going to be smart on here. Chris Carter is the guy.
Hey, Pace, I didn't even have anything to do with the questions, bro. They have everything to do with all this. It's not, hey, Face, Nick asked me this question when we were at Ohio State. Mm-hmm. I told him Orlando Pace. Like, I thought you were the greatest Buckeye from the first day you stepped on the field at Ohio State, start knocking dudes off the football field, and then continue that on into pro football. So, no, has nothing to do with me, big dog.
But hold on, he keeps your names.
I appreciate that, Chris.
Your name's Orlando Pace. He keeps calling you Face. I feel like the audience is going to want to know where this nickname came from. So come on, let us know. Let us know, Orlando. Come on.
I have no idea.
CC?
Oh.
That's just a nickname. We just call him Face.
Like, look at the face.
Look how
he's
cute
adorable. He's so cute.
I mean, he's a giant with a smile like that. Look at that.
What else would you want to call him besides Face?
Fair enough.
Hey, Face,
There you go.
you're here on behalf of Kay Jewelers. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with them.
Well, I'm here, and Chris, you know this as well. Kay Jewelers is the official jewelry store of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And Chris, I have a little surprise for you. I actually have your ring right here. It's Kay Jewelers, your Hall of Fame ring right here.
Oh, my goodness.
It's a replica here. So this is the Chris Carter ring. I think we're going to raffle this off somewhere here in Minneapolis. But no, it's fun. But Kay's obviously here, and fellas, with Valentine's Day right around the corner. Kay is wanting every fella to get their special someone a great gift, and they're trying to win Valentine's Day this year. So we're here supporting that, and obviously with the Pro Football Hall of Fame as well.
Orlando, thank you so much. From Nick and Jenna and I, thanks for joining the show. I'll see you out in Minneapolis on Thursday. That's my city. Let me buy you dinner there. Also,
it's expensive.
Can you talk to the people at K Jeweler? Because I got someone special in my life. I need one of those pendants. I don't need a ring. I got a ring. I need one of those pendants for a necklace. Okay?
Well, let me talk to somebody. I'll see what I can do, Chris.
This is
all right?
unbelievable.
Free stuff.
Thank you, Orlando. Thank you so much. Let's talk relationships in the wake of a big quarterback move. You know the expression, go or get off the pot? Well, the Washington Redskins finally got off the pot.
Wow.
After years of marginal interest in Kirk Cousins refusing to sign him to a long-term deal, they finally are reportedly letting him walk. The Kansas City Chiefs, fresh off their first-round playoff boot, are trading Alex Smith to Washington. I ask you, Nick, was this a good move for Washington?
I promise I will answer the question in a moment, but if you can just give me a second to bask in the fact that Alex Smith, God bless him, is no longer the quarterback
But you don't really mean that,
of my home team. He's a good man. He's a charitable man. He's
a good guy.
He's what people would call a really decent guy. So I wish him the best, and I'm thrilled he now has lifetime and lifetime money. So God bless him, but also God bless that fact that he's not the quarterback for my team anymore. The Mahomes era has begun. Got a cornerback as well, so I'm very thrilled about that.
Mahomes is your guy.
Selfishly. Well, he has to be. For the love of God.
No. Last year, Jenna, before the draft, we had Mahomes on a show in Los Angeles.
That's true.
And from that time, Nick was like, because I was like, hey, man, he's from Texas Tech. Like, these guys said, they have a lot of big stats and everything. Don't know about his. Nick's like, I like this guy.
This is before the draft.
Before the
draft.
Chiefs took him.
Yes.
And then we got to talk to him at the rookie premiere
in Los
Angeles once he was already a Chief. And so I'm excited for the Chiefs. But I think the bigger story is for our audience who are not in Kansas City right now is what this means for Washington, what it means for Kirk Cousins. What it means for Washington is I don't understand what they did. Now, maybe I'm biased. Maybe I have post-traumatic Alex Smith disorder from watching him the last few years. But I do not think Alex Smith is as good as Kirk Cousins. I think he's close. I think they're similar tiers, but I think Kirk Cousins is a little bit better. I know Kirk Cousins is considerably younger. He's 4 years younger than Alex Smith. And to not only trade for Alex Smith and the $17 million he's owed this upcoming season, but to instantly give him 4 years, $94 million, with a reported $71 million guaranteed, I don't think you got better. You didn't drastically improve your cap situation, and you gave up a third-round pick, and the kid Kendall Fuller, Pro Football Focus says he's the best slot corner in football last year. So I don't understand this move for Washington, aside from the fact that for some reason or another, after being with Kirk Cousins from the first day of his career, they never liked him. They never believed in him. Jay Gruden clearly never wanted him as their quarterback. And so they got, to me, just an older version, not quite as skilled, of Kirk Cousins. So I don't understand this move for Washington.
Well, Alex Smith's going to have to change his game somewhat if he's going to continue on. If they're going to be a threat in the NFC East. Because, look, I mean, the Giants are going to come back strong. Philadelphia, man, they got a franchise quarterback. They got a lot of good players. Don't forget what's going on in Dallas. So how does Washington stay competitive? You have to realize it's just like a relationship. You only need one person to fall in love with you. You could have something coming out your forehead. You find one person, and that's what Alex Smith found in Jay Gruden. Jay Gruden knew in the last several years that Kirk Cousins wasn't the long-term answer. But also, does this give Jay Gruden more time there in Washington? Now he's got a new quarterback in Alex Smith who does give him more, especially running options as a quarterback. Now, I think Alex Smith is one of those kind of guys that takes care of his body. He's going to play late into his 30s or potentially play till he's 40 with the tight. He hadn't taken a lot of big hits, all right? But the receiving core and the skilled players, like, he's playing with less than in Washington.
Yep.
So if you look at his numbers, be like, wow, how is he going to be better in Washington with less skilled guys, less speed, less threats around him on the field?
And Cousins had better numbers, just quickly, better numbers over the last few years in Washington.
Didn't he have the top quarterback rating last year?
Alex Smith did. But
Right.
the point but as far as yards per pass, touchdowns. Kirk Cousins had better raw numbers, not efficiency numbers, but raw numbers than Alex Smith, which is
But they throw the ball a lot more.
But with worse talent. My
Yes.
point is Kirk Cousins had, to me, I thought, more impressive stats than Alex Smith with less talented receivers.
So the one question that I think all the football pundits have been asking and no one's been able to answer, and we had Jay Gruden on the show and we kind of danced around it a little bit, is what was the stake in the ground? What was the problem between Kirk Cousins and the Washington organization? What was it that didn't work? Because he played okay and he wasn't disgruntled in any way.
Well, first of all, what didn't work? Kirk Cousins wasn't the guy to get him over the hump. They weren't willing to invest in him long term. But Kirk Cousins didn't lose. I mean, the last several years, he's made how much money, Nick?
Oh, yeah. The last 2 years, he's made $45 million, and he's about to make
a ton of money.
A huge deal.
Right. So he won in that. The quarterback relationship with the head coach. If the head coach is calling the plays, and if he doesn't believe in you long term, we knew that when they franchised him, especially the second time. And they decided they were going to go in a different direction. So I always believe this. When the coach is with the player every day, I take what the coach says. Yeah. Like, my eyes might tell me something, but Jay Gruden actually sent a message in trading for Alex Smith, giving him a long-term contract, the contract that Kirk Cousins has been looking for 3 years.
And it also is noteworthy, Gruden isn't the guy that drafted him. Obviously, Mike Shanahan was there when they drafted him. But I just want to let people know, because Washington hasn't excelled on a super high level, Kirk Cousins' last 3 years, each of the last 3 years, at least 4,000 yards passing, 25 touchdowns. Just the quick list of guys who have ever done that 3 straight years in NFL history: Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, Dan Marino, Peyton Manning, Eli, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, and Kirk Cousins.
Yes.
So, I mean, to move on from him so you can give Alex Smith $70 million guaranteed is curious.
Is there something to be said for the relationship sometimes superseding another player? So maybe the relationship between Jay Gruden and Alex Smith is going to be a lot stronger than it was with a guy like Kirk Cousins, and you can do more with a guy that believes in you and your system?
Well, potentially more. I mean, Cousins, they franchise him. That's no disrespect to him. I mean, he didn't have a long resume when they decided to go with him. They decided to go with him over RG3, who was a big-time draft pick, who they had to admit that he was a bust. So in doing that, they extended some type of faith in his ability, but not the ultimate faith, and that's in a long-term contract. When a coach believes in you, and it's really important, it allows you to really thrive as a player. Yeah. And when you're signing one-year deals, it's hard for them to say that they believe in you because the money tells the story.
This is where I think it was borderline organizational malpractice by Washington. If they thought his 2015 year was a mirage, that was his first really big year, and you want to franchise him in 2016.
Right.
I get it. Like, that is a thing a lot of teams do. But then in 2016, when he almost throws for 5,000 yards, has a 97 quarterback rating, 25 touchdowns to 12 picks, 8 yards per attempt. Once you decide after that year, we're not signing him long-term.
Right.
You knew you weren't ever signing him long-term. You could have traded him. There were things you could have tried to do to now be in this position.
Yeah, they franchised him again, and then they got rid of Deshaun Jackson and also Pierre Garçon, 2,000-yard receivers.
Right.
And now, he made a lot of money, but he still came back with another good season. Terrell Pryor, they signed him as a free agent. He didn't do anything for Kirk Cousins in the 1 year there.
So now we're now in a position. Cousins is the best healthy quarterback to hit the market in a long time. People are like, oh, Peyton Manning was a free agent. He had his neck operated on.
Right.
Drew Brees was a free agent. He had shoulder surgery. Dante had the knee surgery. We haven't had a quarterback this good hit the open market in a long time. A lot of teams are going to be going after him. Go ahead.
I know my man Witt, Jets fan. Jets called him up.
Very much going to want
Kirk
him.
Cousins. You guys have been scrambling. Fitzpatrick, all these other guys. Call Kirk Cousins, and he's played in the cold. All right, he'll be able to throw the ball in that conference. I mean, look, they got Tom Brady. He's already the second best. He's already second best quarterback if you put him in the AFC East.
Can I tell you where I think it should call him? Cleveland. Cleveland. You got the first pick. If you're not going to draft a quarterback, you could make it to where you have multiple number ones in consecutive years of the draft. Load up on blue chip talent, maybe a Saquon Barkley, maybe another star defensive player, and try to get Cousins that way.
Yeah, you might be able to get you an offensive lineman and get Barkley with the number 4 pick too.
Right. There's a lot you could do if you're Cleveland if you can sign your quarterback instead of having to draft him.
Man, that makes too much sense. They're not going to do that. And that's not going to happen.
We would be remiss if we didn't end this segment the way we started by congratulating you on giving you hope and optimism for maybe
Patty
this
Mahomes.
year letting your Chiefs get out of January.
Please, Patty Mahomes.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolf. Fresh off the flight from Minneapolis, that is the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. That is Nick Wright. We are all a little sleepless and blurry-eyed, but couldn't be happier about it because what a game we got to watch last night.
Amazing week in Minneapolis.
Good to have you back, man.
Yeah, absolutely. But a great week there. The city put on a tremendous event, given very, very harsh conditions as far as the weather, and the game lived up to what we want with the Super Bowl.
There are little kids across the country right now that cannot believe it if we were to tell them Super Bowls used to be blowouts.
Yeah.
All we get is great games now, and last night was another one of them.
Yep, and Patriots fans are eating a little crow this morning, but let's take a look how and why the underdog masks are officially retired. That'll happen after you pull off an upset, and there are no more games left in the season. Super Bowl 52 turned out to be just an incredible game. 74 points, over 1,100 yards, only one punt. And when all was said and done, the Eagles bested the mighty Patriots behind an incredibly coached game by Doug Peterson. Nick Foles led the way, throwing for 373 yards, 3 touchdowns, even catching his own touchdown pass. Let's start with him. Here is Nick Foles after the game.
We have such a great group of guys, such a great coaching staff. We felt confident coming in, and we just went out there and played football. We've played this game since we were a little kid. We've dreamed about this moment. There's plenty of kids watching this game right now dreaming about this moment. Someday we'll be here. And to be here with my daughter, my wife, my family, my teammates, this city, we're very blessed.
Get to this point, a lot of people, counted us out, but that locker room believed in each other, believed in me, and I got a great staff and great players, and we found a way to get it done.
Proud of the way our players, coaches, everybody competed for 60 minutes. Just wasn't quite enough. We weren't able to perform at our best.
You can't win the game if you're not in the game, and you play to win, and sometimes you lose. And I'm disappointed. Wish we could have done a better job, but we fought to the end, and I want to give the Eagles a lot of credit. They played a great game. They got a great team, and those guys played really well.
You can understand his frustration. It never really felt like the Patriots were in full control at any point during the game, save for a couple of minutes. But, Cece, you and I spent time in Philadelphia. We know these fans. This is the most amazing thing that's pretty much ever happened to them at this point. They are still partying strong, I'm sure, in Philly. How were they able to pull off the upset last night?
Well, we thought two of the biggest differences in these teams was the defensive front with their 7-man rotation, but New England's offensive line, their game plan negated them. The other unit that we thought had a decisive advantage against New England was the offensive line. And you got to give credit to the head coach because his ability to continue to be aggressive. And I think there's some benefit to having a backup or someone that you didn't have a lot of tape on running this offense. Yeah, Nick Foles has been a starter. He's played a lot of games. But this New England team, they had only had 5 games of tape. So for me, I think that there have been a couple other quarterbacks, Hostetler, Doug Williams, that have gone on as backups to win Super Bowls. But I believe there was an advantage. And there's also an advantage that his coach allowed this team to play aggressive. They did it a lot like New England, too. They started off one way. They started off feeding Alshon Jeffries, and then they switched it around. They had 5 receivers with 3 or more catches. So even after Alshon started it, he didn't get hot again. Then they started moving around Aguilar, the running game. So they were able to move. When you can get 10 first down on third down conversions, twice as many as New England. When you punt one time, when you get 9 minutes more on time of possession, like your chances of beating New England are going to be very, very high. I like the fact last week we never talked about the Eagles, they have to play a perfect game. They have to create all these turnovers. No, we thought the Eagles had a better roster.
Right.
And they played with confidence from the beginning. They took control of the game. New England finally had a lead later in the game, but their ability to come out and have that 7-minute drive to start the game and 7 minutes after they lost the lead late in the game, those things right there were two huge stories. And those two drives right there, I believe, won them the game.
That's the ball game. New England down the entire way, clawing back, finally takes the lead with a lot of time left, over 9 minutes left, when they take that lead in the fourth quarter, 33-32. And what does Philadelphia do? 14 plays, 75 yards, with 2 third-down conversions and a 4th-down conversion mixed in. By the way, who got the 2 third-down conversions, the touchdown and the 4th-down conversion? I think the most talented player on their offense, Zach Ertz. They went to a guy who had helped get them there on their biggest plays of the season. Cece, you mentioned that they were 10 of 16 on third downs, but they were also 2 of 2 on 4th downs. So they were, in essence, 12 out of the 16 times New England could have gotten them off the field.
Yes, great point.
New England failed to do it. That was the
same thing how Atlanta lost last year's Super Bowl.
Yes.
They could not get off the field on third down. New England took advantage of it, and we saw the Eagles do the same thing.
It was because people also have to understand the context of that drive. 14 plays, 75 yards to retake the lead. I know the strip sack ended up being the thing that didn't quite ice it, but came close to it. But on that drive, New England had the ball going into that drive for Philadelphia 3 times in the second half. Here's what they did. 8 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. 7 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. 10 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. New England was methodically kicking their butts down the field in the second half, and Philadelphia answered.
Right. It was important that they had a drive to get some points, but it was more important that they let the defense rest.
Yeah.
And it was more important that they were able to send the message as far as their overall aggressiveness that we're not going to just let you guys come back, because it looked like a typical New England comeback win.
Right. And with this kind of game, success begets confidence. And Doug Peterson went into this game thinking, hey, we're not going to lose, but if we do, we're certainly not going to lose by not being aggressive. Like, we're going all out. We're going to throw everything we have at him. And that showed with Nick Foles. It gave him confidence right off the bat to be aggressive, to march down the field, and that led to his confidence the rest of the game.
And I know we're going to talk about Foles extensively in a bit, but on Doug Peterson, the play, not only going for it on 4th and 1,
but the way they did.
But the play he did far too often. I feel like coaches don't do what they really want to do out of fear of criticism. Like, I'd like to go for it here, but no one's going to criticize me if I take the points. Doug Peterson doubled down on leaning into the criticism. Oh, I'm going to go for it on 4th and goal, but I'm also going to call the trickiest of all trick plays, a reverse pass back to my quarterback. That is, to me, surpassed Sean Payton for the onside kick, for gutsiest call in a Super Bowl that I've ever seen. He was extraordinary, was Doug Peterson, in his continual aggressiveness throughout the game.
Yeah, and also the coach knows his personnel. Trey Burton came to the University of Florida as a quarterback. All right, so he has the overall experience. They moved Trey to tight end at the University of Florida after being a high school quarterback. He also played some quarterback and threw some passes in college. So you're trying to utilize your whole roster. Doug Peterson's able to do that. He puts in a play at the perfect time. I don't think coaches worry about the criticism. I think coaches try to play their percentages, and they try to go for a safer play. Most coaches think alike. The thing that's different with Doug Peterson and Frank Wright, the offensive coordinator, is they are going about it a little bit different. And I think that with Doug, that's kind of his calling card. The same way Ron Rivera. That's the way he besides defense, he was Riverboat Ron. And that's what, people started realizing how aggressive. Belichick has been aggressive for a long, long time.
And the flip side, by the way, the coach on the other side, the greatest coach ever, all respect to Bill Belichick, he's been known for his defense. This is the worst defensive game the Patriots have ever played in the playoffs. The most points they've ever given up, the most yards they've ever given up. Belichick, some of the small things he usually does brilliantly. At the end of the clock, at the end of the first half, didn't use his timeouts properly. Belichick got out-coached by a young head coach in Doug Peterson.
And Belichick, I don't know the reason why Malcolm Butler was not on the field, but for one play. But for a guy in the 2017 season who played more snaps, he played 97% of all New England Patriots snaps. And you didn't have a defensive package that he was a healthy, so he was basically a healthy scratch that he didn't play in. Belichick helped the Eagles by not having Malcolm Butler on that football field, because there's some X's and O's situation that New England, because Philadelphia is a predominantly 3-receiver offense, Malcolm Butler and how they play defense would have been perfect against that Eagles offense.
Were you more surprised that the Eagles won or the way they went about doing it?
The way they won.
Okay.
The way they won. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I mean, just I picked the Patriots. I thought the Eagles could win. I didn't think that the Eagles have no shot. I thought the Eagles could win. If you'd have told me Tom Brady going to throw for 500
yards.
The Pats are going to go 58 minutes without a turnover. They're not going to punt the whole game. No way. This was, to me, shocking. The way Jacksonville beating the Steelers surprised me. The way they beat them was shocking. The way Philly won this game, to me, CC, was shocking.
I don't think shocking. If you'd say Nick Foles is going to have a quarterback rating of 100, I would have said the Eagles were going to win the game, because they have a better roster. The Eagles have a great football team that just happened to have their backup quarterback playing the last 6 games. One coming back at you.
First receiving touchdown by a quarterback in Super Bowl history.
Oh.
2 words to describe last night's game: Nick Foles. 2 years ago, he was considering walking away from the game. Last night, he outduels Tom Brady, combining for 4 touchdowns and throwing for 373 yards with only 1 turnover to win the Super Bowl Most Valuable Player. Foles spoke about his journey from Milan to Minsk after the game.
A couple years ago, there was a time where I was thinking about hanging up the cleats. And, I think as people, we deal with struggles. And that was, a moment in my life where, I thought about it and, I prayed about it. And, I'm grateful that I made the decision to come back here and play.
A lot of people, a lot like this football team, a lot of people counted him out and didn't think he could get it done. And, I believed in him. The staff believed in him. The players believed in him. We just needed time. We needed time together to work out some things. And this whole postseason, Nick has shown exactly who he is and what he can do and what he's capable of doing. He's well deserved of the honor, but I know that he would give credit where credit's due, and he had a lot of playmakers tonight make plays for him on both sides of the ball.
You love a good story to come out of the Super Bowl. You love a great game, but on top of a great game, a good story with a great game really makes for an incredible night. Nick, how remarkable was Foles' run from backup quarterback then to Super Bowl MVP?
It was, for me, as remarkable of a thing as I've seen in recent sports history. Now, I'm a little biased because when they say people were counting us out, they could have been talking about me directly. The moment we found out Carson Wentz was done for the year, I wrote off this season. Yeah. The moment the playoff bracket was locked in, I said there are 5 teams that can go to the Super Bowl out of the NFC. The one who can't, your number 1 seed Eagles. Why? Because Nick Foles is their quarterback. Period, point blank. I didn't care that they had home field. I didn't care about how good their offensive and defensive lines were.
But to your credit, he never really gave you reason to really believe in him, except for a sliver in his career.
But then, he has one of the best NFC championship games we've ever seen. Mm-hmm. We got to see it in person. And then one of the best, all things considered, Super Bowls we've seen. And by the way, keep in mind that 1 turnover. Man, his receiver had that ball in his hand. The 1 interception and then popped it up in the air. It's not like that was
a very fluke play.
Right, it's not like that was a bad pass. But, CC, you tweeted something right after the game that got me thinking. You tweeted about Frank Reich, his offensive coordinator. Football fans know Frank Reich. It's for one reason. Yes. He was the backup for Buffalo when they had the 31-point comeback against the Houston Oilers.
Warren Moon.
So Frank Reich he's offensive coordinator. He was a backup quarterback. Doug Peterson, his head coach, his play caller, is a backup quarterback. And man, Chris, it felt to me like they called plays and ran the team for their backup the way they had wished their coaches would call for them when they were in there. Not, we're going to try not to lose the game, But you know what? We're going to play our full playbook, everything, just like Carson Wentz was out there.
And, Nick, one reason why you react the way you did when the backup went in, because the way coaches coach the backup.
Yeah.
I mean, they scare us to death. When we see backups in there, they go to, and they tell us all week, well, what percentage of the playbook? Oh, we got 100% of the playbook in. Then we watch a game that's foreign to us. Right. And like, man, they're very,
now
very
they scale
conservative.
it down.
Why? But Doug talked about it. I needed some time to figure out what this guy can do. And the combination between Doug Peterson and Frank Reich, given Nick Foles the confidence that we've only seen with him in maybe 2013, it's amazing to me. Very aggressive in the play calling. And the last 2 weeks, because that's the only time that they trusted Nick Foles, or at least that they trusted their game plan. With Nick Foles, they were going to throw the ball deep. And their ability to convert on third down, just look what they've done the last 2 weeks. How many points they score against the Vikings?
What was it, 41? 38. 38-7 they won, correct?
How many they scored last night?
41 last night.
Now, if you're talking about combined, especially since week number 7, this New England defense won the top in the NFL, and the Vikings won the top 3 defenses the last 3 seasons.
79 combined.
What Nick Foles was able to do because the confidence of Peterson, man, we're going to go after him. Not only on third down, we're not going to try to run the ball on third, we're going to throw the ball. And also on fourth down, because you don't decide to go for fourth downs on game day. You start letting guys know during the week, hey, you know, this week we're going to be aggressive. If we get on the other side of the 50, look for us to try a couple trick plays. Look for us to try to push it down the field. Look for us to try to maybe go for it on fourth down. And it breeds confidence to a young team and a quarterback who knows he's a backup. He knew that a couple years ago he questioned his ability to play pro football at a high level. But you point out something, Nick. Man, as a wide receiver, I coach wide receivers like I would want to be coached. I try to put in the play designs that wide receivers like, a lot of variety and a lot of make them think that they're more important.
Sure.
Them getting Nick to this frame of mind, I think, is the most important thing to Philadelphia's championship run, besides Howie Roseman equipping them with an unbelievable football team.
It also lets the quarterback know, hey, we're not scaling anything back for you. Like, we don't think less of you just because Carson Wentz is out. If we're going to win, we're going to win with you in there as the leader, at the helm. Go out and win a game for us.
And guess what that we now know? Had they gone with the approach, once Foles is in there, we're going to try to make sure our quarterback doesn't lose us the game. We're going to rely on the defense. Guess what? They still probably beat Atlanta. And guess what? They still probably beat Minnesota. They held Minnesota 7 points.
Right.
They didn't need great. But in this game yesterday, if the idea was, listen, we're just going to do what's gotten us here with Foles. We're going to scale it back. We're going to do all these things. Trust our defense. Man, that defense had no answer for Tom Brady yesterday.
Right.
They needed every last point.
And that's the biggest difference between this story, Nick Foles, and the other 2 that we've seen in Super Bowl history. One being Doug Williams, 1987 with the Washington Redskins, and one being the Giants in 1990 with Hostetler. The one things that are similar, Parcells and Gibbs had a lot of confidence in their backup quarterbacks. So they played very, very aggressive. But it's easy to have confidence in your quarterback when your defense, Giants and Redskins, played lights out.
Right.
In this case, their defense has been supporting the team. Their defense didn't play lights out. That's why this is a unique story, Nick, and that's why people should just be enamored with Nick Foles in doing this on the Super Bowl stage.
How much money do you think Nick Foles made himself yesterday?
Well, man, it's interesting. He signed a 2-year, $12 million contract this offseason. He is wishing he signed a 1-year, $6 million contract. Go ahead and be a free agent, Nick. He made money or made a new team.
Jenna, that's not the right question.
What's the right question?
The right question is, Chris, how much money you make off Nick?
Okay, well, I know that. I know that answer.
Come up.
All right, let's get back to the game now. Brandon Cooks left in the second quarter with a concussion. I mean, he got wally-whopped. CC, how much of an impact do you think this had on the actual game itself?
It had a huge impact. I mean, he is their legitimate deep threat. And given the way Tom Brady took advantage of the secondary, I mean, he was going to have a monster day. I believe he was going to have the best day of his career in his first year with the Saints. The Saints, I mean, with the Patriots.
From the
Patriots traded for him for a day like today. Yeah. You need that 4-3 speed. Now, Amendola, Hogan, Gronk. I mean, New England worked that vanilla offense real tight. I mean, but they needed Cooks in there because at the end, his speed is missed. Yeah.
Listen, it is hard to say.
Very gentle.
In the moment it happened, I thought it was a huge injury. It's hard to say the Pats missed him a ton because Brady did throw for 500 yards, but maybe some of those 8-play, 75-yard drives could have been a little quicker, which is helpful when you're trailing. Obviously, you'd want your best, your best true wide receiver out there. You would have liked it. The Patriots may do because they're the Patriots, but man, and that was a brutal hit. It's a hell of a hit.
And then here, one of the most important defensive plays of the game, Brandon Graham managed to strip Tom Brady. Eagles recover, allowing them to extend their lead from 5 to 8 while taking another minute off the clock. CeCe, let's talk about this one. How big of a play was this?
This was a huge play, not only just because of the results, but let's just talk from a scheme standpoint. Brandon Graham, is a outside rusher, all right? Philadelphia was not getting a pass rush. What they decided to do was took a page from the New York Football Giants playbook when Justin Tuck and they had the NASCAR package, and they moved some of the defensive ends inside, so they have 4 fast guys on the field. So they moved Brandon Graham inside the defensive tackle, so he would have an advantage against Mason, the right guard, who I believe is one of the weaker players for New England on their offensive line. And his speed and power on the edge of a guard compared to being outside on the tackle, that was the difference in this ball game. And this turnover right here was able to give Philadelphia that extra and give them the field goal at the end. Now, Tom Brady still put some fear in the Eagles, but Brandon Graham, when they couldn't get pressure from their normal rush, they move a defensive end into defensive tackle who makes the play of the Super Bowl.
Man, that was their 1 sack the entire game.
Yes.
That was it. That was it. What we thought that was going to be a huge part of the game. Eagles D-line, it got some pressures, but that was their 1 sack. I want to remember what you were feeling in the moment. The Eagles had just failed on the 2-point conversion. So they're up 5. The Patriots have a timeout. They have the 2-minute warning. There's 2:20 left. I looked online because I'm known to place a wager or two. In that moment, the live odds, meaning you can bet the game as it's going on, it was a pick 'em. Patriots down 5, 2.5 minutes left. And Vegas said, man, it's a coin flip game right now. And I feel like watching the game, everyone, at least on my social media timeline, thought, oh, well, we know how this game's going to end. The exact way, by the way, you said it was going to end, which was the Patriots driving at the end of the game to win by a point.
But this is the thing. Chris Long was outside. I thought Chris Long was going to be the guy that deflects a pass, have a strip, fumble at the end, but Brandon Graham was next to him.
Man.
You know, so putting the pressure on the edge, it came from the defensive tackle spot.
I just want to say one thing about Brady real quick. Brady's the greatest quarterback I've ever seen, maybe the greatest football player ever. We spent the last 2 weeks with, you know what I mean, basically paying homage to him. And that's a bad play by Tom Brady. It was Super Bowl on the line. That wasn't blindside. That was the guy came through the right guard, right where Brady is. It's a type of play where if you can take a sack there, if you the 2-minute warning's coming. Like, all you can't do is that.
Right.
And Brady knew that it was bad. That's why he tried to fake the open hand. He thought they was going to give him the Oakland call. You know, so that right there, he knew that he was in trouble. Brandon Graham pulled off the play, man, that changed the Philadelphia Eagles and their fans' destination to be able to get them their first Super Bowl in franchise history.
Nick, you just said earlier, you know, all the fans knew how this one was going to end. I mean, they were just kind of watching. You know what's going to. Is there any possibility that the Patriots felt the same way? That they were like, look, this is how this is. We always do this. We're going to be fine. No sense of urgency. And then.
I mean, I think they had a sense of urgency, and I don't think they were like taking it easy early on or anything. But I'm sure they went into that drive more confident than any team's ever gone into a drive with 2 minutes left down 5 points in the Super Bowl.
But would that have worked to their detriment?
There's only one time that I saw New England that they thought they were going to lose. And then we still had to pause for that. That's when Gronk was trying to go for the Hail Mary, and the ball was in the air, and all of us who have seen these games were like, is there a flag on the play?
Right, looking for, hoping.
Okay?
Yeah.
So after there wasn't a flag on the play, that was the one time the New England Patriots knew that they were going to lose, when there was no time on the clock. There was no one in that organization. They don't have too much confidence, but they have the confidence to know they respect the game. They think they're going to make a play at the end, one of them, to win the way they always do.
And they were probably, just very quickly, they were probably, all things considered, glad the Ertz play was called a touchdown. They would have preferred it be incomplete, but if he would have been down at the half-yard line,
yes,
they were only down one at the time, was Philadelphia. They could take all the time. They were like, oh, okay, Brady down less than a score, 2.5 minutes left, the timeout.
Plenty of time.
We got this. Right. And then, man, what a great play by Brandon Graham. Led the Eagles in sacks this year.
If before the game you called Vegas and you bet that Tom Brady would throw over 500 yards and lose the Super Bowl to Nick Foles, you'd be a very rich woman this morning. You'd also be a rich woman this morning. However, the Patriots surrendered 538.
You would have to be a witch to make that bet,
Whatever.
So it was actually very apropos.
You know, when I wrote it at 3 this morning, it made sense, and it worked. Patriots surrendered 538 yards of offense, the most ever under Bill Belichick in the playoffs. And now that it's been 8 minutes since the game ended, we turn to the future. Tom Brady said he'll be back. Bill Belichick was unsurprisingly vague. And Gronk said he would consider his options in the offseason. So, CeCe, what do you think the Patriots look like next season? And we can just sort of talk about this from above, because I'm sure we'll get into it over the course of the next couple of days and weeks.
Okay, I know the Krafts aren't going to sell the team. I don't know that Belichick's not going to return. I don't see great people that walk away from what they do really, really well. I'm sure Belichick has a contract for next season, so I expect him to be there. Tom Brady, just flat out, he's going to play until he's 44 or 45. Next year, he turns, 41?
Turns 41.
He's going to be there. So those are the most important things. I think Gronk has a real issue. I think he's battled it the last 3 years. How long do I want to play this game? How long can I sacrifice my body? How long how long can I be fully committed to playing professional football? I believe that's a real issue with him. Have no clue what he's going to do. But New England, they'll still be all right with Gronk because I've seen him play. I saw him play the second half of last week's game without Gronk. I saw him play last year without Gronk. So I know as long as Tom is there, he will be and he will have offensive weapons around him. But the thing about New England, that let's not forget, we went into this season with them being the biggest favorite that we have seen in the NFL in a long time. All the moves they made this offseason, we thought that this team was, ready for right now. Man, their defense got to get fixed. Man, they got to change some things on that defense. Like, you just cannot give up that many big plays. During the regular season, they gave up 60 pass plays of more than 20 yards. Like, that is not Belichick coach defense. We know they're losing Patricia. We're nearly losing Josh. So they're going to look different. I don't think Bill can replace the type of guys that he has now in Matt and Josh, because there is a trickle-down effect when you lose skilled guys who have been with you as long as they have. And I believe it will affect them. I believe it will affect them a small amount. But look at all their Super Bowl wins. They've been by a small amount. All the Super Bowl losses have been by a small amount. So small amounts can be large when we're talking about the New England Patriots.
All right, so as far as just to copy or to jump off from what you said about the defense as a whole, the best pass rusher they had was James Harrison. I mean, that can't happen. Your best pass rusher can't be a 39-year-old you picked up off of waivers after Thanksgiving.
I think he played less than 40 snaps before he got to them.
Right. I mean, a guy that couldn't make the rotation for the team he'd been with for almost the entirety of his career. He instantly came out there and was the only guy for the Patriots it felt like was getting a consistent rush. But as far as to answer the question, all right, so I would say we are 100% Tom Brady is back next year. Belichick, I think, is more than 90%. But less than 100. The thing that's interesting to me about Belichick, and maybe I'm reading way too much into this, we know definitively Matt Patricia is leaving to go coach the Detroit Lions. Josh McDaniels, by all reports, has a job as well. Won't talk about it. Did a second interview. The reason I bring it up is, does Josh McDaniels think there's a slight chance that Belichick could be moving on somewhere, and that's why he doesn't want to officially take his next job, because his next job could be right there? And then there's the one Gronk. Man, I feel like Gronk is maybe a little better than 50-50. I don't think Gronk knows. I don't think he was lying after the game. Now, it was interesting, the exact quote he gave. He was asked about his future, and he said, I don't know how you heard that. Not The way he was saying it, like, man, somebody that I've talked to about my future is talking. That was the context of it. It wasn't like, man, where's that coming from? It was like, wait, how did you hear that? And what you got to keep in mind about Gronk is not only the injuries, but because of Gronk's celebrity, he's one of the few non-quarterbacks in this league
that could have a second career very easily,
and a lucrative one.
Yeah.
Maybe not the $8 million a year you can make playing football, but Gronk probably could cobble together a seven-figure income in the offs. You know what I mean? If he moved on from football, not a lot of guys can do that. And Gronk, the concussion, you see him, he plays with that body armor. Like, his body, he's beat up, and he plays a super physical style.
How much you make?
What? Next year, he's going to make about $8 million.
Okay. All right. Y'all just let me know. I mean, y'all make all these suggestions about people quitting. Like, how many people? Like, I just don't see it happen. I believe Gronk is realer. I believe there's zero chance Belichick goes somewhere else, especially to coach. So we think he's going to retire? Like, no,
maybe
he's
run
not.
A team. I think it's. Can I say something about Gronk real quick? Because we're mostly agreeing on Belichick.
Yes.
You know someone who walked away from nearly $8 million?
Who?
You.
Well, I played 15 years at a time. I had 8 straight Pro Bowls. Like,
I get it.
I had another job offer too.
Well, I think Gronk would have another job offer. Maybe not the same. I don't think they're bringing him on inside the NFL like they did you, but I think there's something. And
no, because I don't think Gronk knows what's going on inside of Gronk.
and for that reason alone, he could definitely step away.
Go ahead, please. No.
No, that was it. I think we agree that Belichick's not going anywhere because realistically, where else would he go to coach? And we don't think he's going to retire
Brady
anytime
can't,
soon.
man. Brady's
locked
one of
in.
his propaganda money.
Brady's already one season into
Facebook. With Gronk, it could be a little ploy to try to get a little more money, all right, to get an extension with the signing bonus, which is guaranteed, you know. So he's saying, I'm risking a lot. Maybe if y'all come give me a little bit of love, maybe I'll question, do I want to do this? And then they'll acquiesce.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think that might have a little more to do with it, too. I think Gronk, though, might be looking at some pro wrestling. All right? I believe that he's a guy that potentially could, and that's not the first time I've heard that.
Okay. There you go. Pro wrestling, Gronk. We're going to have David Deal on tomorrow to give us all the inside scoop on it.
All right, wait, quick, in 10 seconds, do you think because they lost, we're having this conversation? If they won, would we,
I think
all three then?
You guys would have been worse. Oh, Belichick, everybody's leaving.
Everyone, okay. I just want to make sure. That
and the Gronk stuff we had been hearing, we mentioned it.
Yeah,
I mentioned last week that this could be Gronk's last game as a Patriot. Like, that was something that was on the board. Win or lose.
Right.
I don't know if it will be, but it's on the board.
Let's talk about it. Of all the things Doug Peterson could be accused of, coaching soft is not one of them. He started aggressive. He continued aggressively. He finished aggressively. Already up 3 points in the first half, the Eagles elected to go for it on 4th and 1, running a trick play they called a Philly special with former high school quarterback Trey Burton. Burton found Nick Foles in the end zone, made it look easy. The touchdown gave the Eagles a 10-point lead and gave Foles all the confidence in the world. Foles spoke about the play after the game.
Doug and I were talking. I was like, let's just run it. It was a good time. And the end was a little wider than I thought. So I was like, I really need to sell like I'm not doing anything. And it worked. Trey made an amazing throw right on the money. I just looked it in. And, yeah, I mean, we've repped it for a while, so I was excited to get it run and in the Super Bowl.
Now, that play we've been working on for the last couple of weeks and just needed the right time, right opportunity. And guys executed it brilliantly.
How interesting that both teams called a play for the quarterback to catch a ball. Only one of them did, and it ended up working out. How key was that play for the Eagles?
It was huge. It was huge. And I like the play call. When you talk to Doug Peterson, he said, I am going to be aggressive. I'm not kicking field goals. I'm going for touchdowns.
But he actually meant it.
And he meant it.
Yep.
I was talking to Alex Smith. A lot of guys in town. Talking to Alex Smith the night before. And, no, actually, it was Friday night. No, it was the night before.
All good.
And he was talking about not being aggressive. The only team, Kansas City, who this year beat both of these teams in the Super Bowl.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And he talked about how important as a quarterback It is to stay aggressive the entire game, the entire season. Doug Peterson did it, and his team responded. When you go for a play like that before the half, it's like a heavyweight match in a boxing ring where it's like you are going against the heavyweight champion of the world, and you're giving him everything you have. Buster Douglas, Mike Tyson. I'm swinging with everything I have because I have nothing to lose. You have absolutely nothing to lose. So to go for that, to get it done, sends a message not only to your locker room, but to the New England Patriots locker room going in at the half. Like, we saw what you guys did to everybody else. We saw what happened a couple weeks ago in New England. This is not us.
Right.
You better come out with your A game because we're coming out swinging on you.
Yeah, there's a few things as far as from an X and O standpoint. If you make a critical call like that, you need some help. Right? You need some help. What do I mean by that? You need the defense to be in the right call. If the the Patriots had been in a zone coverage, but they knew on fourth down, they liked the pressure, especially inside the red zone and especially inside the 5-yard line. You know the last time New England was in a situation like this? Malcolm Butler intercepted that ball.
Oh, yeah.
All right? So you know that they're going to be in 0 or 1 coverage. So you know that no one's going to guard the quarterback. So not only the timing, execution, listen to the quarterback. Even when I went in motion, the defensive end or outside linebacker was wider than even I thought. Now, as a quarterback, anytime you hand the ball off, either RPO or anything else, you have to either play dead. If not, you're an active player, and they will hit you. So you have to be a great actor. So Nick Foles, man, his ability to be able to act, to lull the guy to sleep, the coverage on the backside, the overall execution. Trey Burton didn't give it away. An old quarterback, he didn't take off his right-hand glove. He still threw the football with his glove on. So there was no indicator that he might do it. The one thing that I saw in this game, not only the aggressiveness of Doug Peterson, but he utilized his roster top to bottom more than Bill Belichick. Something Belichick does better. Corey Clement, big-time role in this game. Trey Burton making that play right there. Big-time plays by guys on his roster that we did not even mention in the 2 weeks of preparation.
Listen, that was, to answer the question, how key was this? Well, it was one of, after the Brandon Graham strip sack, maybe the single biggest individual play of the game. How gutsy was it? It, to me, might be the gutsiest play I've ever seen in a Super Bowl. Sean Payton's surprise onside kick to start the half was, to me, the top of that list.
Whoa.
This is because it was twofold. It was, one was just going for it on fourth down. You keep in mind the situation. They were leading. They had led the whole half. They were, in that moment, it was 15-12 Philly. They could have, with less than a minute left in the half, they could have said, you know what, we didn't get the touchdown.
And as you say, nobody would have criticized him for it.
No. I mean, we didn't get the touchdown. And Peterson already knew he was open to criticism because he had gone for too early. CC would call that chasing points. Once you go for that too early, if you then leave 1 point on the board there, you then don't get this, right? All of a sudden, you've left 4 points on the board against New England. People are like, man, you should be up by a touchdown right now. Instead, you're up by 3. But instead, they went into the half up 10. It was, and what compounded how good it was by them is the Patriots, on the play that got the Eagles down in the red zone to get first and goal from the 8, Belichick didn't use one of his timeouts to give the Patriots even added time at the end of the half. So Belichick did something poorly he normally does great, which is the clock. And then Peterson stayed true to form. I'm going to keep the pedal down at all times.
I think what was so brilliant about this is typically we see Coach Belichick playing the game in advance, meaning I'm thinking about the next thing, the next move, the next half, the next situation. Peterson had to be thinking, the Pats get the ball in the second half.
Yep.
My defense isn't playing stout. They typically come out in the third quarter with the possession and they put the ball in the end zone.
Yes.
He understood that. So he knew a field goal is not enough. I need to make sure that we get this ball in the paint, get 6 points, hope that the extra point is made because we had some issues, and keep the pressure on the New England Patriots. So this was all coaching. I mean, you have to have things go right, but when you are able to make a call like this and your team responds, it lets you know, not only as a head coach, that my players can handle this, but that they want this and that they're excited for this opportunity, and they did it.
Yes, and it was followed up later on before the half by a stop. So trick plays are nice. But if the defense don't get the stop before halftime,
yes,
and if they don't get the stop at the end of the game, you still don't win the game. So it was an amazing call, but if the rest of the team doesn't come through with it, we're not reviewing this play. This is not a great call in the Super Bowl. It's just another play that we will soon forget. But they followed it up with other plays that made this even a bigger play.
And this is where you know me. When it comes to coaches, I'm big on expected points added, clock management, stuff like this. One of the reasons I was so glad to see, just from an analytical standpoint, Doug Peterson go for it on fourth down. Now, I didn't know he was going to do a reverse wide receiver pass, but to go for it is, you have to know there. If we go for it and don't get it, New England's backed up on the one with less than a minute remaining. They're not getting points before the half in that spot. But if we kick the field goal, and then all of a sudden we get 3, but then we kick off and give New England a chance to get 3 as well, that's almost just as bad as getting 0 points to begin with. So you had so much to gain from going for it there, and the play call was unreal.
And you can't miss out that they're going to have 2 possessions. They're going to get possession after that one, and they're getting possession after a very, very long halftime.
Greg Jennings, I try.
Stay on y'all's corner.
I try.
All right, in the suburbs.
If 2017 felt like the year of the catch rule in the NFL, it's because 2017 was the year of the catch rule in the NFL. In a season defined by close plays being ruled not a catch, 2 close calls were both ruled touchdowns last night. One with Corey Clement maintaining control in the back of the end zone. The other with tight end Zach Ertz extending the ball across the goal line there. All right. Let's break this down. Greg, first of all, you think the refs got both of these calls correct?
I do. I absolutely do. I think, number one, Zach Ertz, we shouldn't even be looking at this. That's clearly a catch. That's clearly a receiver turning into a runner.
Transition.
He died. That was, why are we even talking about this? I mean, even when I was listening to the game, I love Chris Collinsworth, but come on.
He was confused.
Are you kidding me,
Collinsworth
Chris?
was flat confused.
Yeah. I'm like, I love what he does. Chris, stop. You play receiver. He's caught the ball. He's now running. He dove. Nothing close to the Pittsburgh Patriots.
Cece, explain just real quick before we get to the more controversial one. Just Cece, explain to the audience, because we all agree on the Zach Ertz play, the difference between that and Jesse James.
Well, Ertz had control, and if the defensive back wouldn't have been there, he wouldn't have fallen. That's what the referee, he can bring into question, was the guy going to stay up or not? And Zach would have stayed up. There was contact there with McCourty, but he had 2 steps possession, something that's common to the game.
3.
He did all those things, right, and he began to lunge. So people want the rule at the goal line where a receiver is a running back and the ground can't cause a fumble. Well, when you have possession of it, he is a running back.
Right.
So if
that play was over before the ball ever came loose.
It was over because Ertz did the right things. Stay upright. If you go to the ground, all these things. Now, if he would have gone to the ground, then that right there, they would have negated it.
Right.
So try to stay on your feet as much as possible. It makes the rules a lot easier.
So we all agree on the Zach Ertz thing. He caught the ball, turned into a runner, then lunged. You said now let's talk about the other one, the Corey Clement one.
Corey Clement, it's a great catch. This is my issue with this catch rule. Now all of a sudden, if the ball has any subtle kind of movement,
here it is.
It's to be reviewed and incomplete potentially. Look, the ball can move, but it's about, do you maintain possession? That's the catch. Like, the ball can move, but
that's
do you
the Bertie Manuel rule from the playoffs, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the St. Louis Rams. The reason why they changed the rule because the ball hit the ground and moved. So then they altered the language in the rule because the rule hasn't changed. What they've basically done is alter the language.
So with him going to the ground, now if the ball moves and he goes to the ground, because the ball moved before he ever even went to the ground, but he has to maintain possession while going to the ground and creating contact between him and the ground. The ball never moves once he hits the ground.
Well, this is the thing that when did he have possession? A lot of times because he caught the ball in his chest. All right, you're allowed to catch the ball and transfer the ball into your running arm. And that's what he did. People think that this is the Kelvin Benjamin play. It's not the Kelvin Benjamin play. He has possession now. 1, 2, 3.5.
Okay.
All right?
So here's the thing. I am not going to argue with either of these great wide receivers about the merits of what is and what is not a catch. But I can, on totally equal footing, argue with you guys on this one. All year long, that play has been called differently depending on who the officials are. All year long, that play has been either a catch or overturned to a non-catch because some referees, and I know Al Riveron's running the thing, so maybe he's got, depending on the day, when he readjusts it, because after what I would call the bobble, that foot doesn't get down. And all year long, with the games I've been watching, sometimes that's a touchdown because that left foot is out.
So this is where you're not on equal footing, okay? He didn't bobble the ball.
No.
All right?
He never bobbled the ball.
Okay.
He transferred the ball.
Okay, and so that what I'm telling you is that maybe I used the wrong terminology. Plays that look like that all year long have been called inconsistently in the replay
We've
office.
seen that play overturned, but I judge every play on itself. Everyone's trying to say, well, Ertz is Jesse James, and this is the No, they're not. Every play is a story in itself. He had possession in his chest. He transferred it into his running arm, so his last foot hitting the line has nothing to do with the catch.
Yeah, and for me, this is the reason why I become frustrated with things like this is because the league has done this to themselves. The league has clearly done this to themselves because they're making it difficult for referees to just make a play and stick with that. Now referees are depending upon the replay to confirm and call and judge out what is a catch and what is not a catch. So the refs really don't have any merit here. They just make a call and then they go to replay and then it gets overturned or it gets accepted as what we saw it was. But that's a catch.
And I also talked to Tony Romo. I did an event with Tony Romo on Sunday morning. And we talked about replay. And I told Tony how much we enjoy the game. Told him how much you enjoy his commentating.
I like Romo.
But he said we're gun shy as announcers. So Chris Collinsworth, he had it wrong. But as announcers, and talking to an announcer, they're a little gun shy because of what you talked about. What's happening this season, how the refs have been inconsistent, so it affects how they call the game.
How much of this gets addressed in the offseason? Are we having the same conversation next year?
It seems like that is what, at its core, from hearing from Roger Goodell, name check my partner here. By the way, Commissioner Goodell, the first time about 6 months ago you name-checked my partner when he had a story on Ezekiel Elliott and said, Chris Carter, I didn't know he worked in the league office. Oh, but then right after the season, my man's called up to the league office to help out with some things. So I've just 2 times been name-checked. I'm just pointing that out. But more importantly, what the NFL wants, I think, is for that play that we saw from Corey Clement to consistently be called a catch. Because, by the way, I think that should be a catch. I want that to be a catch. My complaint was not that he didn't catch it. My complaint was
that it was called.
Throughout the year, it felt to me like when I was watching games, that's going to be overturned, because the foot touched. And I want to know while I'm watching. I knew the Zach Ertz thing was going to be a touchdown.
But the reason it's an issue is because we're looking at the referees that are on the field of play. They're not making that judgment call.
No,
so it's going back to the league office, and they're making the same call with all the same looking plays every single week. So this is an issue that they have to deal with. They have to become more consistent. This is not the referees who are on the field.
Roger Goodell's going to change the rule. He's going to change.
He has to.
Fans will be excited for the 2018 season. They're going to change.
You heard it here. First, second, third. Moving on, the 2018 Hall of Fame class was announced on Saturday. Randy Moss became the first wide receiver to become a first-ballot Hall of Famer since Jerry Rice. Here's Moss the moment he found out he was being enshrined in Canton.
Now that the NBA season is heating up, I wanted to talk about another podcast we do at Fox Sports, and that's Chris Broussard's In the Zone. Each week, Chris breaks down what's trending in the NBA and the biggest names in the league. Previous guests include Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Shaq, John Wall, and myself. So if you love the NBA, make sure to subscribe to In the Zone wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, on behalf of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, on behalf of your fellow Hall of Famers, on behalf of all of us who love the game, it's my privilege to welcome you to Canton, Ohio, which will be your new home for the rest of time. And Randy, I want to thank you for all you've done for the game, for all you're going to do for the game. Okay, Randy, and I want to thank you so much because this is going to be the beginning of your journey, not the end of your football career. We're going to put a gold jacket on you. We're going to give you a bronze bust. We're going to give you a ring of excellence. Okay, and the things you're going to do with that are incredible. You're going to change people's lives just like this is going to change your life.
Thank you, Ms. Baker.
What'd you think about that, Cece?
That was pretty amazing. Ray Lewis and I were on the same floor. So one of my friends was able to be on the floor behind Dave Baker when they knocked on his door. It's an unbelievable experience. It does change your life. Randy Moss is not a crier, but you could see the appreciation for what football has done for him. And to me, being a person associated to him, I was rewarded too. Because all my hard work that I spent with that kid, trying to make him a better person, a better football player, man, I saw it. And not only was he a great football player, but I'm really satisfied with the man that Randy Moss has become. And at the end of the day, if you're not a good man, what else do you have? So I'm very, very excited to see Randy Moss join an exclusive class. And that would also put him and I in a very, very rare class with Jerry Rice and Terrell Owens, Jerry Rice and also Tim Brown, and John Stallworth and Lynn Swann. So now we are in a rare, rare area. Not only did you have a great career, but you had someone on the opposite side. People say wide receivers are very, very selfish. The chances of having two people being in the Hall of Fame as wide receivers, so Moss and I, we cherish that, and I'm very, very happy for him. It's great to see the video there. That's priceless.
Those people CC listed, the only list of teammates that are both in the Hall as wide receivers.
Yes.
I want to applaud the Hall and those voters. It's a very select group, around 50 people. It's somewhat secretive. They got this, I think, for the first time in a little bit of time. They got this exactly right.
This is a great class.
It's a great class. And Ray had to get in first ballot. He did. We both felt Randy needed to be in first ballot, but we were worried because there's only been one wide receiver in the last 30 years in first ballot.
Yes.
That's Jerry Rice, the greatest wide receiver of all time. T.O. needed to get in. Now, T.O. did some things the weekend of that probably explain one of the reasons people didn't want him to get in initially. T.O. is always going to be T.O. off the field. And, talk about that another time. But T.O. as a player absolutely has to be in. And then Urlacher, Dawkins, I tweeted, those three have to be in, and then Urlacher, Dawkins, Edge, and Steve Hutchinson. To me, those four guys are fighting for the last two spots. And Urlacher and Dawkins, there's no argument against. What'd you tell me about Brian Dawkins?
1 interception, 15 straight years.
And he was probably the hardest of this class to get in.
Yes.
But for Randy, I remember your Hall of Fame speech, and you mentioned the people who helped you along the way. And you said to them, a high school coach, best friends growing up, you guys are in the Hall of Fame as well. Well, you're already in the Hall of Fame. But part of you gets to go in a second time with Randy because of the things you guys did together and because of the work you guys did together. And so that's great, man. I'm happy for Randy. I don't know Randy. You do. You know what high regard I hold him in. I think it's amazing.
Yes, and also some of the other, Bobby Betherford, who built great teams as a general manager. Robert Brazile, amazing linebacker for the Houston Oilers, gets in the senior committee. And Jerry Kramer, Bart Starr's center, he gets in. So not only the first-timers, Ray, Urlacher, Moss, but on the back end, these older guys, man, this class is dynamic from top to bottom.
Well, I learned so much about the Hall of Fame just from being on this set with you every day, and I had no idea that it was so hard for wide receivers to get in. For whatever reason, there's so many of them. Is there any possibility that this maybe changes that maybe we got over the hump with allowing wide receivers in, or is this just because they were so ridiculously gifted?
Well, Terrell Owens should have gotten in 2 years ago, so they held him out because they moved the finish line. Randy Moss, they couldn't deny him. Larry Fitzgerald and these other guys will be coming in the next 7 to 10 years. The bar is so high, because if you look at T.O. and Randy, both 150 touchdowns, both over 1,000 catches.
Yeah.
No, it didn't get any easier just because they got in. It's going to always be very difficult for wide receivers to judge what is a Hall of Fame wide receiver based on inflated numbers.
I showed my son Randy Moss highlights for about a half hour this weekend because he was too young to watch him. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. What a fun athlete to watch. Happy for him and all those guys.
Finally, one of the more important defensive plays of the game. Brandon Graham managed to strip Tom Brady right here, and the Eagles recovered, allowing them to extend the lead from 5 to 8 while taking another minute off the clock. CeCe, how big of a play was this one?
This was the play of the Super Bowl. I mean, if you look at Tom Brady driving to win the game, Brandon Graham, they don't have any sacks at this point. If they don't get any sacks, they're not going to win. All right? I'm not... It's hard to take it back and be like, okay, hindsight. But if they don't get pressure on those last drives and if they don't sack Brady, they're not going to win the game. So let alone sacking, but they get the strip, the turnover, the momentum, which leads to 3 more points to be able to give them the margin of victory that they had. Man, this was a big play after not being successful. So the ability to stay positive and the ability to stay relentless, the way that front has done all season with 7 players playing 400 snaps, but they were negated in this game until this play.
Brandon Graham's a team captain. Brandon Graham led the team in sacks. It's very fitting Brandon Graham made the biggest play of the Eagles season. I do want to give credit, though, to the best player on the Eagles team, Fletcher Cox. If you watch this, everyone's single blocked except for who? Fletcher Cox. So the center can't help over on Brandon Graham.
So once you decide to double team Fletcher Cox, all the 3 other defensive linemen are one-on-one. It's easy math. They got 3 more guys left, and you got 3 guys to rush. So one of you other guys with the single block, you got to get home.
And by the way, you can see it in there. Fletcher Cox still moves the pocket somewhat right there.
Brady couldn't go to his left.
Couldn't go to his left. And so this is a great play by Brandon Graham. I do try as much as I can to give credit rather than find blame. And Brandon Graham deserves a ton of credit. But we have to be fair here, especially with how much deification we've done of Brady the last few weeks, and he's earned most of it. This is a bad play by Tom Brady with the Super Bowl on the line.
Why? Tell us
You're
why.
down. Because you're down 5 points. It is not a situation where, I just can't take a sack. No, you're fine. You're in 2nd and short. There's plenty of time. You have a timeout. You're on the plus side of the 2-minute warning. The only thing you can't do there is turn the football over. That's the only thing you can't do there. And he did, and it wasn't because the right tackle or the left tackle got just swim moved. Right. He doesn't see him coming blindside, hit from the back. I don't know why I feel the need to act those things out, but it just happens sometimes. Brady, it was right in his face. This rush comes and he loses the football.
And you got to have ball security. We criticize Matt Ryan after last year's Super Bowl. All right? When they turned the ball over, they weren't able, we criticized him for that. In these critical situations, Tom Brady has been the best that we've seen.
Right.
But Brandon Graham's ability to get to the ball, but let's give some credit to the scheme. They moved him from defensive end to defensive tackle so that he can get a mismatch on Mason, the right offensive guard, who I believe is probably the weakest offensive lineman on New England's team. So from a scheme standpoint, they came up with a little trickeration to give them an edge late in the game.
All right, this was a head-scratcher from last night. Malcolm Butler was the Super Bowl hero for the Patriots 3 years ago. Last night, he did not play a defensive snap. After the game, Butler quickly left the locker room, telling reporters, quote, "They gave up on me. It is what it is." For reference, Butler played in just under 98% of the defensive snaps this season. CeCe, the decision to bench Butler, did that cost the Patriots?
Absolutely. It cost them because you're going against a team that plays 3 receivers most of the time, a team that doesn't have a fullback that they use on a regular basis. So you need Malcolm Butler because you need Rowe to be the nickel. And we know that at this point in the season, Stephon Gilmore, he's done a transformation on the other side from compared to the way he started the season, being very rough. So when you decide to bench Malcolm Butler, just from an X's and O's standpoint, you put Rowe in the game, so he's got to play 70 snaps. Man, the Eagles went after him. He is not Malcolm Butler as a player.
Jonathan Batamosi's getting defensive snaps.
Yeah, so what it does also is from a coverage standpoint, and Philadelphia was able to exploit this. It makes their safeties have to guard either Nelson Aguilar or someone else in the slot. And that's what you could see throughout the game.
Right.
Chung guarding Nelson Aguilar making big play after big play, conversion, moving the sticks. And that was a huge difference in the game. Now, Belichick's not going to explain it. New England, they keep all these things in-house. But when you decide to not play a guy who's played the most snaps, and this was more important, they dressed him.
That's
so
the key.
They wasted a roster spot in the biggest game of the year. And the thing that I don't know what happened, but I do know the effect. Him being benched affected these other guys and their ability to get a Super Bowl. So Belichick, whatever he had going on, it affected Tom Brady and the rest of that roster because that was not the best New England team that could have been on the field.
Man, the offense did its job.
Yes.
Period, point blank. The offense, you go there, score 33 points in the Super Bowl despite a missed extra point, despite a missed field goal. The defense could not get off the field. Philadelphia, 10 of 16 on third down, 2 of 2 on fourth down, so essentially 12 of 16 in chances to get off the field. And the fact that he dressed is a key component of this. You have 53-man roster. You can dress 46 on game day.
Yes.
So there's 7 guys that are not going to count for your game day allotment. If this were that Belichick was insistent after the game that it was not disciplinary, meaning he didn't miss curfew, he didn't get arrested, and we didn't know about it. There was if it were disciplinary and you're benching him, you don't dress him. The fact that he dressed tells me I believe Belichick. It wasn't disciplinary. But this guy played every single defensive snap of both playoff games leading up to this.
Right. Now, this is not the first time he's been benched this year. In the preseason, he got benched. He got off to a slow start. Belichick said he wasn't pleased with his overall performance. But this is one of the things about Bill Belichick. It's all nice when you win it. But I'm going to tell you, he's very, very dismissive to players. And it came back to haunt him because it affected their ability to be able to play defense. And when you have a safety guarding a wide receiver, that is not his strong suit. You saw Chung during the game. There was a couple times he had to be helped off the field. And because Belichick decides to keep Butler on the sideline, it affects the rest of the team.
You can't swallow your pride when you see that your defense actually does need him. Not when you're playing okay and you know you don't and you want to make a point.
No, because he thinks that no one is bigger than the team. But in this case, the team as a whole suffered because of the decision that you made. Now, all practice, they went through the same lineup. Malcolm Butler was in all the practices. Now, even if they were going to start Rowe, they didn't tell him until after the national anthem. So how are you going to tell someone one of your frontline players is not in the game and it's not going to have an effect? You got a guy that's in his 3rd Super Bowl in 4 years. He's crying on the sideline as they get ready to prepare to start the game.
And I know people probably know this, but just a reminder, yes, if you're thinking was that him, he is the guy that picked off Russell Wilson. Yeah. He is the guy that made...
He did win you a Super Bowl.
He did win you a Super Bowl.
One of the 5 that you've won, he won it.
And, by the way, that was the Super Bowl that changed everything. Because had they lost that Super Bowl, the narrative surrounding Brady and Belichick would have been, haven't won a Super Bowl since 2004, had lost 3 in a row. The whole thing, everything is different if Malcolm Butler doesn't make that A-plus play. Talked about this before the show. Just knocking the ball down against Seattle would have been an A-level play.
Yes.
Then Seattle would have had a 3rd and goal from the 1, and they probably run it there. The fact that he made one of the greatest plays ever to win you a Super Bowl, which leads me to believe, Jenna, you were asking before the show and during the breaks, like, why would this happen? And I couldn't come up with an answer. Like, we don't know because Belichick's a little mercurial. But one thing that occurred to me that might sound crazy is if Belichick thinks he can win without you, man, it's a great, hey.
It's a great negotiating ploy.
And a message to send to anyone, negotiating not just with him, but with anybody else on the team. Hey, guess what? You remember that guy that won us a Super Bowl? Who's one of our, even though he's had a bad year, he admitted he had a bad year, one of our more talented defensive backs in a contract year.
Watch what I do to him.
Watch what I do to him. Think what I'll do to you. Like you said, it's all fine and good if Nick Foles throws 3 picks and you win this game 38-13. It's not so good when you allow Nick Foles to throw for near 400 yards.
And it bears repeating again, he played every snap of the first 2 playoff games for the Patriots and almost 98% of their defensive snaps all season long.
How much of a difference,
sits.
Jenna? What's the difference between 6-2 with your Super Bowl record and 5-3?
Good point. Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels has decided to stay in New England. He was all set to be named the Colts' new head coach. But why do we think that? Well, the Colts did release a statement saying he had the job, and a press conference was planned, and he already hired assistant coaches, and he bought a Colt. But reportedly, he didn't buy a Colt. Reportedly, Robert Kraft sweetened his contract, gave him some love, and convinced him to stay. So let's start the bidding here. Cece, what is your reaction to McDaniel's decision?
What kind of job would he take? If the coach job is not good enough for him, I mean, it's not like 30 NFL owners are knocking down Josh McDaniel's door. I mean, like, let's not forget what his reputation is. Now, I know Bill Belichick, a lot like Nick Saban, a lot like Urban Meyer. Like, if you're a coach and you've had success, like, you can go to these programs and they kind of scrub you clean, kind of like the government, kind of give you a whole new identity.
Right.
But I remember who Josh was. So if he's not going to take the coach job, all right, what kind of job would he take? Next question would be, there must be something else wrong with Andrew Luck. And the third conclusion is, did Kraft give him enough in the conversation outside of the money in his contract that would lead him to believe he could be the next guy in New England? Like, those are all 3 of the things that I have to ask myself. Because, man, these NFL jobs are precious. We don't hear a lot about turning down NFL jobs. We hear a lot about turning down college jobs, but not jobs in the NFL.
Especially if this is your second go-around, because you may not have a third go-around at it.
And you mentioned, Chris, his reputation. That was before he reneged on a team.
What?
That was before he had a spotty reputation leading into this. What NFL team outside of New England now can trust this guy to be their head coach? Especially when you consider he is staying with the Patriots. We would not anticipate any time in the upcoming seasons the Patriots are going to be a team where their season is over prior to the playoffs. So there's already the added degree of difficulty if you want to hire a coordinator from a team that makes the playoffs. You have to wait a longer period of time. You make yourself more susceptible to this exact situation once again. And I want to lay out the exact timeline for the audience. He first interviewed with the Colts 3 weeks ago. We thought he might have the job then, but there was some speculation the Titans could want him as well. Remember the Titans? Oh, they're going to keep their head coach. Oh, if they win the playoff game, they won the playoff game. And then the moment they lose the next playoff game, he's out. And so maybe he doesn't go to the Colts. He has a second interview with the Colts. And then as of yesterday, agrees to the deal to the point where a guy like Matt Eberflus, and I apologize if I mispronounced his last name, he leaves his job to go sign with the Colts and signed with them. Mike Fair leaves his job to go sign with the Colts and signs with them. And then all of a sudden, it's, I have to do what's best for my family. And I don't disregard family considerations, but your family didn't grow or change or go through any machinations over these last 3 weeks. So I think you keyed on it at the end there about his future with the Patriots. But this isn't even Belichick reneging on the Jets, because he reneged on one head coaching job to take another head coaching job. Like, that was not only maybe not even a lateral move. That might have been a step up. This is unprecedented for a guy to have a head coaching job, turn it down after accepting it, to then stay a coordinator.
So if you read between the lines, you would have to assume that the words head coach had somehow, some way come up when Robert Kraft went back to Josh McDaniels and tried to convince him, sweetening the pot, if you will. Maybe there was more money. Maybe there was, hey, Belichick only has this many years left. Maybe there was, Belichick wants you back because you are one of the guys who can work with Tom Brady. There was a lot of speculation going into this. And I wonder if you say what other head coaching jobs out there, if you compared the New England Patriots in a couple years to the Colts next year, which do you think is a better offer? Even if you think the Patriots may or may not even be a real option.
Well, there's better ownership. So the Patriots are a better franchise. They got better history, and Kraft knows how to put people and delegate in authority. So there's no comparison between Irsay and Kraft.
None.
But no, there's no comparison at all as far as the way they go about doing business. But for Josh, you know, I gotta think about Andrew Luck. I'm not gonna think as much about New England and what's going to happen there because we don't know that. And I'm not going to waste all my airtime guessing, okay, Bill Belichick's going to be there a year. Bill Belichick's going to be there 2 years. I'm thinking about the thing I'm going to concentrate now on Andrew Luck. What do the injury reports say about him? How long is it going to take? And as reported, is he going to need another surgery? So for the things that I will make important as far as trying to research is Andrew Luck and his overall health. And Indianapolis now, what do they do? A month late in the head coaching process, who ends up taking that job?
Here's why that is not what I'm focused on. Because of the timeline. If it were he was offered the job, he pondered it, he went back to his second interview, was offered the job again, and then said, you know what, I'm good, then I would have totally been with you. Something's up with Andrew Luck. Chris Mortensen, one of your former colleagues, reported he might need another surgery. But as of yesterday morning,
that was his
he
job.
was on the phone with Irsay and accepted it. And then yesterday evening, he changes his mind. That is a very small window of time for new Andrew Luck information to come out. Now, maybe there was some Andrew Luck worry bubbling up. But I mean,
the Andrew Luck information could be just as likely to happen as Bill Belichick not coaching. The likelihood of which one is Andrew Luck's got a worse shoulder than we thought, or Bill Belichick is going to walk away from New England.
Well, I don't think Bill Belichick's going to walk away from New England this year. But I do think the meeting with Robert Kraft that happened after he agreed to terms, didn't sign, but agreed to terms with Indianapolis, that is the variable in this that appears to have changed the situation. And I know people are saying Robert Kraft sweetened the pot money-wise. I don't know what he makes as the offensive coordinator of New England. I can say with full confidence, you are not going to make more as the coordinator in New England as you would as the head coach in Indy. So while you could sweeten the money, you couldn't make the money even. And yes, the Patriots have a far better ownership situation, but one is a head coaching job, one is a coordinator job. I'm not saying Robert Kraft said to him, hey, you're going to be the head coach in a year. But I don't think Josh McDaniels does this if he is not fully confident that he is the next head coach of the New England Patriots. It's a hell of a gamble otherwise because of the reputation you started talking about at the beginning.
CeCe, who does this affect more now? The Colts, a month into the process, where all the other guys that they've already interviewed already have basic head coaches already? Or the Patriots getting their guy back who Tom Brady feels very comfortable with going into the start of a season at age 40, 41?
Well, let's not put this out there. Tom Brady's going to play if they hire a small monkey to coach the New England Patriots, okay? Like Tom Brady's going to throw for 4,500 yards, 4,300 yards.
Regardless of who his OC
Yes,
is.
Josh McDaniel, let's stop that. Tom Brady has continued with all three. Charlie Weiss, my man Bill O'Brien, and all these guys have taken credit for Tom Brady. Tom Brady does most of his work during the offseason with the quarterback coach house in California. So, no, it affects both franchises. I just think New England was in turmoil after the Malcolm Butler suspension or him not playing an active suspension, the defensive coordinator going to the Lions, losing all those pieces and losing Super Bowl 52. I believe that Kraft and them wanted to kind of reel things in and stop some of the chaos because it's hard to replace your offensive and defensive coordinator and losing your third Super Bowl. So people talk about New England as how many Super Bowls they won. They've also lost as many Super Bowls as anyone in NFL history with 5.
Welcome in to First Things First. I'm Sarah Kustak. That's the Hall of Famer, Chris Carter and Nick Wright. Guys, how was your weekend? How was the All-Star weekend?
It was great. It's great to be back, CeCe. I missed you. Sarah, it's great to work with
Thanks
you.
for having me.
Absolutely.
Welcome to First Things First.
Thank you. Welcome to you.
Thank you, CeCe. Welcome back. Well, Nick has been gone.
I've been gone.
Try to let him get a welcome. We're not talking to you.
I was about to thank you for holding it down last week, and it's wonderful to see you, Sarah. What, Chris?
I did not even make it through the first minute. Last week, Sarah, I did not raise my voice Nick called me yesterday, said, how was last week? I said, I did not raise my voice all week, man.
Like no one was challenging you. It's just, Hall of Famer.
It's in the first minute, and I still have to raise my voice because he can't give the proper greeting. So welcome to First Things
Thank you. I am thrilled to be here.
Thank
Great
you
to
so
see you
much.
guys.
And if people don't know Sarah, if you don't live in the Northeast, you're not familiar with the Yes Network, a truly brilliant basketball analyst, and I know that's not the exact role you're playing right now, but you can play a bunch of them, so we're really pleased to have you.
Thank you, Nick.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
An all-star lineup.
Yeah, there you go.
You guys are also, so speaking of All-Star, the new All-Star game format, it seemed to be a smashing success. Team LeBron outlasted Team Stephen 148-145 thanks to defense. Yes, actual defense. And an All-Star game, LeBron was the MVP with 29 points, 10 rebounds, and 8 assists. Here he is on the game's new format.
I think the format was great. I think the fans did a great job of reacting to it in a very positive way. And, for me to be the captain of the team, Steph being the captain of his team and us doing that, that draft, it was something that hadn't been done before. And the great thing about our commissioner, he's absolutely okay with trying something new, to change the format. And it definitely worked out for everybody.
So LeBron says it worked out. CeCe, do you think the new format saved the All-Star game?
I think it was very exciting. Now, the All-Star game, the All-Star weekend, which it's grown to, has been entertaining, but the game has kind of been anticlimactic with the three-point shooting, the dunk contest, the rising stars, some of these other things that we enjoy seeing. But now, at the end of it, to me, it is the best All-Star game going collectively because of the number of events and of the legends that you're able to see, the different programming they have surrounding the game. But we like to see competition. And the format, it made it more competitive. You could see early in the game that it was going to be different by the number of fouls that were being called. Like Kevin Durant and LeBron, they were actually playing some defense early. So I do like it because in the end, I believe that the players and more importantly, the fans were rewarded with the best basketball players in the world playing in an exhibition all-star game, but it being competitive. You could see their skill level. You could see their love for the game, but no one wants to see things that aren't competitive, things that kind of are fixed. So I think it was very, very good. For me, it's been a longtime NBA fan. I believe that they got it right. And just listen carefully what LeBron said. They do have a commissioner that is right now, he is willing to tinker with something that has become part of the mainstream as far as sports. The overall popularity of the game is growing. So the commissioner, I like it, Nick, that he is tinkering with it a little bit. But it all starts from the top, the commissioner into who the captains were. And that's what made this a success.
And it wasn't just yes, I think this was a huge success, but it wasn't just the picking of the teams. And Chris, you talk about all the time, athletes say they don't listen, they don't hear the criticism, but they do.
Yes.
These guys knew that the last 2 years, they've been heavily criticized for the All-Star game being not even a glorified scrimmage, just a glorified 5-on-0 on one end, 5-on-0 on the other end. They were sensitive to that criticism. You then add the extra competitiveness of LeBron, the best player in the league, saying, I picked these guys. Steph, the second or third best player in the league, saying, I picked these guys. And the, I would say, additional level of competitiveness of KD and Steph going against each other. Guys that are sometimes on the same team or in All-Star Weekend usually playing together, having to go against each other. And you saw what was a great basketball game, compelling finish. CeCe, you'll laugh at me. I, of course, looked at the spread and the over-under for the game. So the over-under before the game was over 300. It was 333. A minute and a half in, the live betting, it had adjusted down 15 points. 15 points a minute in. Not because they're like, oh, it's not pacing to score, but it was obvious to everyone, oh, they're going to play defense. They're going to try on both ends. You saw Durant guarding guys out above the three-point line.
Yes.
And you could tell we were going to get a real basketball game. And whenever Team Steph started to pull ahead, Team LeBron went on a run to keep it close, which allowed us to see that great finish.
Was that predicated on LeBron setting the tone? Do you think it started with him and the mentality that he took entering the game?
Well, I'm just not going to give it to LeBron. It's so easy to give LeBron credit, but Steph on the other side, the buy-in, the communication about the draft. And I'm sure right from the beginning, Steph knew that it was for real because LeBron did the right. He took KD. So that, I mean, they had the 1 and 2 best players in the world versus whoever Steph was going to select. So I think it's a combination of the leadership that we have in the NBA. Steph is responsible. He knows, he's been around the NBA with his dad being an NBA player, that he knows this is very important, and LeBron. So I just think where we are is for what our superstars think. They thought it was important, and you could see that going into the rest of their teammates.
And Adams, I think LeBron and the other real top-level players, meaning basically just KD and Steph, those are the top 3 most visible and probably 3 best players in the league. They set the tone. But on top of that, what LeBron alluded to was Adam Silver being forward-thinking and allowing the guys to do this. I think there is, unlike what we see in other sports, particularly the NFL at times, where it feels like, whether it's accurate or not, it feels like there's an adversarial relationship between the commissioner and the players.
Yes.
In the NBA, it truly feels like a partnership. And I don't think the players wanted to let Adam Silver down. Like, he gave us this cool thing of the draft. They are embracing it. They added more financial incentives to the winners, and they added the additional charity aspect, which I'm sure was meaningful to these guys.
Yes.
And they embraced the entire weekend. This is that we talk about how on Christmas is when the NBA season starts. That's true to an extent. But All-Star Weekend is when the NBA season takes the attention from the rest of the sports world, because football dominates the conversation up to the Super Bowl and really the week after. And so now this is the key point of when the NBA becomes the dominant discussion point, aside from a few weeks of March Madness, for the next few months. And I think it got off to an outstanding start.
We know there was so much dialogue heading into the game about televising the draft, the decision not to do it this year. But if they change their mind, if Adam Silver says, okay, next year we liked the steps we took this season, next year we're going to televise the draft, how much better do you think it would be?
Well, I think that the players, after the draft was revealed, they started letting the fans know that they would have liked to have known what the draft order was. So it's just a matter of they'll get it right. They got this part right. They took a big chance. I'd much rather them get it right and draw it back a little bit compared to just trying to unveil all these different things with the teams, with the captains selecting the teams. But I believe next year they'll add on to that just to enhance the overall experience.
And I think C-Webb, who was a big weekend for him, gets nominated is a finalist for the Basketball Hall of Fame. He mentioned, I think it was him on the broadcast, of a way they can do it, which I think would be great. So Sunday night's the game, obviously. Saturday night's the 3-point and the dunk contest. Friday night, when I think they have the celebrity game, if on Friday night you also had all 24 guys, 24 jerseys for each different team, mid-court, maybe halftime of the celebrity game, something like that, and you have Steph and LeBron or whoever the 2 vote getters are, draft their teams like that with the guys there. Go pick up your jersey like you do basically on street ball. That would be outstanding.
And also that would help out from the injury standpoint, because LeBron, he drafted a lot of guys that end up getting hurt.
Right.
Then you have a more up-to-date roster. But it's also very impressive that LeBron and KD could take even the backups, because the backups of the best players in the world are still the best players in the world. So it was very entertaining.
With that being said, was there any game within the game that you enjoyed seeing LeBron and Kyrie together and Embiid going against Westbrook? Was there any relationships you enjoyed most?
We saw LeBron
Nick
and
is
Kyrie.
petty like this, so I'm sure he has a couple of them.
I'm actually going to do a basketball thing. We saw LeBron and Kyrie laughing about something uproarious. I mean, it was as hard as I've ever seen 2 human beings laugh on the sideline. We saw Russ and KD have a warmer reception together than we'd seen from them in recent times. But what I was most excited about was Joel Embiid out there amongst the best players in the world in the biggest spots in a really competitive game, and Embiid trying to guard guys 25 feet from the basket. Embiid then trying to take advantage of mismatches on the other end. I thought while LeBron's going to get the headlines from this weekend, and justifiably, and then the final play where he and KD stuff Steph, I thought Joel Embiid, his star, which is already shining brightly, I thought he really excelled on this stage. I was happy to see that.
I think also Durant and LeBron and Steph, it being like it was the NBA compared the East versus the West, that kind of bitterness that people kind of wanted to make with the rivalry was kind of a way. We were just looking at the best players in the NBA, and irregardless of East or West, it was about the storylines of the guys that have accomplished the most at the midway break, and it gives us tremendous momentum coming down the stretch, the third of the season, I'm sure that you're looking forward to.
And it was the LeBron and KD, the 2 best players in the world. They had the Uber thing throughout the week that obviously made the news for other reasons. It is cool to see the 2 best players in the world. That I didn't know this. they really have a great relationship.
Yes.
And seeing them together, playing together for the first time, aside from in the Olympics that we've ever seen, was really cool.
Yeah, if they spent a lot of time practicing together before KD went to Golden State. LeBron spent a lot of time in the offseason with KD, that they have a stronger relationship than the public understands or knows.
Moving on to something that happened earlier in the week. No secret, Paul George has been rumored to be considering the Lakers in free agency. The LA fans, well, they let him know they would love to have him during the three-point contest on Saturday. We want Paul chants broke out in Staples Center. Paul George was asked about the love he received. Take a listen.
I know what I feel is best, but it's a long ways until the end of the season.
When you hear that elephant in the room, though, those elephants in the room say, we want Paul, how does that make you feel?
It makes you feel great. It makes you feel great, but, I love it. It's not to say that I don't, but, I've felt the energy. I know where the love is.
Well, Oklahoma City Thunder fans are saying we stood out when you flew in at the airport waiting for you.
They did.
Nick, what do the Thunder need to do to keep Paul George?
They need to, in this postseason, look like they are a championship contender. And when I say in this postseason, I want to let people know we're at the All-Star break. The Oklahoma City Thunder have 26 losses. The Los Angeles Clippers have 26 losses. And the Los Angeles Clippers right now are the 9 seed. The 9 seed does not get to go to the playoffs. So while the Thunder have turned it around from what was a tough start, and they're dealing with Roberson's injury, but dealing with it relatively well, the idea that they are a lock for the playoffs is not accurate right now. Now, I think they'll make it, but there's 26 losses is the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Blazers, the Pelicans, and the Clippers. One of those teams is going to get left out. So I look at it simply, Chris, like, let's assume they make the playoffs. If they make the Western Conference Finals or further, I would be shocked if he leaves. If they only make the second round, I think it's about a coin flip. And if they get knocked out in the first round or somehow miss the postseason, then I think he would be asking himself, well, am I really closer to competing for a championship here than in my hometown where his heart seems to be in Los Angeles? So I think it's all about how they do in the playoffs, Chris.
And regardless of what the fans, wherever the game would have been, Paul would have been a fan favorite. Like, even if it had been in New York. Like, man, Paul George come to New York. He is that kind of special player, one of the best two-way players that we have in the NBA. But, you mentioned the records and everything. It's got a lot to do with their seeding. I do believe they'll make the playoffs. But their seeding, man, if they're 6, if they're 5, they're better off at 5 or 4 than they are going 6, 7, or 8 because you're talking about a first-round matchup with either San Antonio, either Golden State, or Houston. And in those battles right there, they could be out in the first round. And going out in the first round, besides having him actually in OKC where he knows the ownership, he knows the fan base, he's seen the facilities, he's played one season with Russ, how much more encouraging would that be than potentially starting over in Los Angeles? Like, you have to realize the draw of Los Angeles, just the normal players, let alone someone who is from California. So if he's had a desire to play there, I could see Paul George deciding to play with the Lakers. Also, LeBron James. Like, we don't know what LeBron's going to do. So they could be successful in the playoffs, make it to the Western Conference Finals. And if LeBron decided to go to Los Angeles, I believe that just wipes out whatever type of chemistry that they were building. And I believe LeBron's decision will supersede whatever that they do as a team in OKC.
That might be true, but I think there's also, let's say LeBron does not go to Los Angeles. I still think Paul George could go. But only if Oklahoma City flames out. I don't think he has to go with LeBron. Right. And so the other thing to remember about Paul George, there's only a handful of guys in the NBA that can say this. I have been the best player on a team that was one of the Final Four teams standing. You go around the league, there's not a lot of guys because it's usually the same teams. Steph can say that, Durant can say that, Russell Westbrook can't say that. He's never been the best player on a conference finalist. So Paul George can say that. And the reason I bring that up is he knows what going deep in the playoffs feels like, which means when he doesn't, it's something he can feel he knows what he's missing out on. And so it's another reason why I think these playoffs are so important for the future of Oklahoma City. Because it's tough to get free agents there now. Sam Presti's done a great job through trades.
Yes.
I'm yet to see the big free agent that says, I've made my decision, I'm going to go live in Oklahoma City.
Well, more importantly, look at the two that they've lost in Harden and in KD. Like, if he couldn't keep, they were drafted there,
Right.
and they couldn't keep them, let alone someone that's come from another franchise like Paul did with the Pacers.
Do you think Paul is a player that wants to be the guy? Do you think, I mean, what he was in Indiana, do you think he is the type of player that wants to be the number one option?
I don't think he has to be. I think that if that was the single most important thing to him, he wouldn't be entertaining staying in Oklahoma City. But I also don't think he's against it.
Do you think the single most important thing to him is winning?
Man, it's always so hard because we always expect guys, of course, the most important thing is winning. But that's not always most people's jobs are some type of competitive, and you weigh all of it. Like, I want to work at the best company, but I also want to work where I'm happy.
Right.
I also want to work where I enjoy the city. I think winning, I couldn't see Paul George going to any non-contender except for one in his hometown of Los Angeles. Like, you know what I mean? I think winning is very important to him. I don't think it's the only math he has to do, though.
Right, and I think with the history that he had in the East, with the Pacers going against LeBron, I think winning is important to him because how he fared in those games, he knows it's about talent. And it's not about people questioning his talent. People think he's one of the top 10 basketball players, 15 basketball players in the world. So how do I win? Because we know he's going to win contract-wise. He's not a really, really big brand. He's not a guy looking to sell shoes and everything. So now it's based on what he does on the court. And he's very, very competitive. Every time he's faced against LeBron, he stepped up to the challenge. So I'm sure that he wants to be part of a solution that's able to unseat Golden State.
And I'm going to bring up a team, not that he could go to, but that could play a big role in this. It's the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves right now are the 4 seed. Right now, the Thunder are the 5 seed. So that's who they would face in the first round. If you're in Oklahoma City and you get to round 2 and you lose to the Warriors, I think you say, okay, like, you know what? Everyone might lose to the Warriors this year. Everyone lost to them last year. Mm-hmm. We are still close. If you lose even to the Rockets or even to Popovich and the Spurs when Kawhi's back, maybe you can say, all right, you know what? A few tweaks here. Roberson back next year. We can be better. But if you lose to the Timberwolves in round 1, and you say, well, they're just going to get better. They've got young players. Jimmy Butler's not leaving this year.
Right.
Like, if we're not even good enough to beat that team, much less the real cream of the crop in the West, then am I making a winning decision staying here versus Los Angeles?
And I'm basically making the same move from the Pacers.
Right.
Because the Pacers weren't the number 2 team in the East. They had a couple battles with LeBron. I mean, they weren't as close as he would like them to be. He played outstanding. So he's like, wow, my career is kind of going in circles. I feel like I'm on a franchise that's the 4th or 5th best, maybe in the conference. Right. That's not something I'm sure that Paul is looking at this point in his career.
In 2 places that are smaller markets. So
yes.
The appeal of going not only back home, but to a market that
right,
like
so a market where, and everyone, while Chris said, you know, he's not super focused on his brand, I think guys like to be a big brand. It might not be the most.
Yeah, but he's not someone that is drawn. He doesn't have all the other things around him that the other players do.
Sure.
You don't hear about him having these other interests that these other players do.
He's not making a movie like Kyrie?
No, he's going fishing a lot of times. If you follow him, he likes to fish a lot. So
you like the fisherman.
Do you like to fish?
I used to like to fish. I'm in New York City. Ain't got too much fishing going on.
Go in the Hudson.
So, yeah, right.
We'll talk to this in the break. But finally, LeBron James won the All-Star Game MVP last night, scoring 29 points, 10 boards, dished 8 assists, and had the game's biggest offensive play down the stretch. It was LeBron's 3rd All-Star Game MVP. Nick, how impressive was LeBron last night?
And this was great. Now, I don't think that All-Star Game MVPs are a real part of a player's historical legacy. Like, so there's a very famous picture of Michael Jordan that shows him in front of all his major NBA trophies. So the 6 titles, the 5 league MVP trophies, the 6 finals MVP trophies. And in that picture is his 3 All-Star Game MVP trophies. And I always felt those kind of look out of place. Like, those are not part of his lore. So I don't think this is like a legacy statement for LeBron. But I do think that it was awesome to see the best player in the world in a competitive game amongst the other best players in the world in an important weekend for the NBA, in a week where LeBron's had to talk about everything but basketball because of the nonsense swirling around him, that he stepped up on both ends of the court from start to finish. CeCe's the oldest guy out there. He plays the most minutes. He hits the shot to tie it. He hits the shot to give him the lead. He gives him the assist to not quite seal the game, to give him a 3-point lead. And then the defensive stand along with KD on Steph. Like, it was, the NBA couldn't have scripted it better. And the fact that their best player was the best player on the court was quite fitting.
Yeah, and all those trophies, I disagree with you as far as Michael Jordan. All those trophies should be there because it's the perfect time for the best players not to play. They got every excuse, all the distractions, they're the best, all the obligations, all the things that are required of them, media. They could take that weekend off. They know that he's logging the most minutes. Like, so for me, I do believe those trophies, they should be in there because it is the biggest stage besides the finals, which a lot of players don't make it to the finals. When are you going to see all the best players? At the All-Star game. And, Nick, you know that I'm one, if they're keeping score and if the lights are on, I'm about doing your absolute best. So I do think that it's important that LeBron, when Steph is there, when KD is there, that if he is the absolute best, that does go along with his other MVP during the regular season or finals MVP or finals trophy. So I think it's very, very important that the best do their best. We talk about Adam Silver changing the rules and wanting to be more emphasis. Well, why wouldn't we put an emphasis on the best players? So this was a very competitive All-Star game. So I'm glad to see how the players performed. And Russ winning the MVP the last couple years, I believe it was nice to see LeBron or one of the marquee guys. And it wasn't just based on offense. It was based on how he normally plays during the regular season with an all-round game.
And well, what about relative to how his month had went in January and then where he's trending now? I mean, we've seen a rejuvenated LeBron with all the changes in the how much
February
is
shaking up to be as good as January was bad for LeBron and the Cavs as a whole. Now, we'll see the Cavs again. We've seen a very small sample of them post-trade deadline, but they've looked great in both of those games with the new players. And LeBron does look re-engaged, rejuvenated, and ready to attack this last third of the season. And it is worth noting, LeBron's played in every game this year, which is he doesn't take a lot of time off, but almost every year he takes off 5 to 7 games without being injured. He's played in every game this year until last night. The other interesting thing to me, CeCe, was aside from LaMarcus Aldridge, who played 4 minutes, and Al Horford, who the score sheet says he played 12, but man, I don't remember a single one of them. There were no 30-year-olds out there. It's a young man's league, of course. These guys are as young as Embiid and Towns. To the older end is Durant and Steph. And then there's 33-year-old LeBron James, drafted in 2003, who's still the standard bearer for all these guys who are supposed to be in their athletic primes.
All right, well, Adam Silver, of course, made the changes to the All-Star game. So let's move on to the massive changes that could be coming to the NBA playoff structure. Commissioner Silver says the league is studying the idea of abandoning the East-West playoff format in favor of seeding teams 1 through 16. Silver said the biggest holdup is the travel in the early rounds. Nick, would changing the playoff format be good for the NBA?
It potentially, I think, could be great. And I think it's smart of Adam Silver to publicly acknowledge that they are considering this now, because what they can't do is this. They can't wait and see if LeBron goes west and then be like, oh, guys, by the way, we're changing the rules. Like, you have to at least have it in the hopper ahead of time. And Daryl Morey was on Twitter this week in the Rockets GM saying the NBA is considering more drastic changes than even the ones that Adam Silver has laid out specifically. More things that I think would be more shocking, up to and including having seeds 1 through 14 be in the playoffs and then a tournament for those final 2 playoff seeds to kind of dissuade teams from tanking. There are some ideas that I have as far as how they could tweak it. But I do like the idea of you get the best 16 teams, regardless of conference. And if you're worried about travel, you can, depending on the distance between teams, either do a 2-3-2 or a 2-2-1-1-1 format, which can minimize the travel.
Yeah, I like the concept that they're trying to get better. Like, if we're looking at the playoffs, and this has been going on for 4 years, so this is the first time the commissioner has really mentioned it publicly that they're looking at it. But if you look at Golden State, since they've been on a record pace 4 seasons ago, that's when people publicly started looking at, wow, should maybe we cancel the normal format of East versus West because the West is so top-heavy? Because at that time, San Antonio had a record-breaking pace for the NBA. Right. So you have 2 record-breaking teams in the West, and now we've seen what they've done, Houston, OKC, and if potentially more players went to the West, the only way to correct it is by going to a 1 through 16 team format.
The other thing we saw this offseason was Paul George go from the East to the West. Jimmy Butler go from the East to the West. So some of the most talented players went out there. Bill Simmons tweeted this. It's something that I've talked about in other sports. I love the idea of it. I want to see what you, as a guy that could have dealt with something like this, and if the NFL had done it. What if, so there's 16 teams in it. 1 through 8 obviously have home court. What if you get to pick your opponent in the first round? So the 1 seed looks at teams 9 through 16 and says, okay, in addition to our reward of getting home court, we get to decide who of the 8 teams are available we want to play. And then the 2 seed doesn't, you go on down the list. To me, it would create maybe some animosity. Wait, hold on. We didn't have the worst record, and you picked to play us. It also could mitigate if you're really worried about the travel. All right, we'd rather, if we're Golden State, we'd rather play Portland, who's the 14 seed, rather than play Washington, who's the 16 seed, however it worked out. And there could be some strategy as far as, say you're Boston, and Cleveland's not in the top 8, and Kevin Love's only been back 5 days. You're like, man, we're going to have to go through them at some point anyway. We're going to go to the finals. Might as well try to. You know what? We want to play Cleveland first round. To me, I don't see a downside to it. I think it'd be exciting. I think it'd be interesting, like the All-Star draft could have been.
Well, obviously you're on vacation. You just think too dang on hard. All right. What do you do the second round? Do you still select your opponents?
No. Then it's a true bracket.
Then it's a bracket?
It's a true bracket. It's seeded the way it is now.
I just think with the private planes that these teams own, I think that the seeding, if they do go to the new seeding, not being East and West, they should just go by the numbers compared to, so we don't have beef, so we don't have teams that think that people are arbitrarily picking on them. Just do a seeded system based on the numbers.
I love this. Can you imagine the meetings between owners, front office, coaching staff, who's deciding what team? I mean,
why are you
that's enough to blow up an organization.
It's not like everything that you say is like Einstein brilliant.
I'm not saying it's Einstein brilliant, and I'm not even saying I'm the only one talking about this. I know this idea is being talked about.
That means you're just not the only crazy person. That means just because someone else is talking about it.
I know this idea has been floated in the league office. You said there'd be no reason for beef. Beef is good. Like a little animosity, a little no one believed in us.
Is that proven? Well, is that proven you just made that up?
No. We saw in the NFL one of the themes of the Eagles is we're underdogs.
That wasn't a beef.
No. But nobody's a bigger underdog.
So was New England. They said they were an underdog.
Okay, but nobody's a bigger underdog than the team that gets picked as this is the team we want to play in the first round.
I
right?
thought players didn't listen to the respect thing and everything. So now you're on the corner of they do listen to everything.
Man, you've been telling me for 6 months. You've been telling me for 6 months that that's a real thing. I'm finally listening to you. I'm trying to have a forward-thinking idea. People got upset that we couldn't watch the All-Star draft, right? Do you know how exciting it would be? All right, with the number 1 overall pick, James Harden's out there. It's like, all right, you know what? We want to play the Philadelphia 76ers. Joel Embiid coming and get it. With the number 2 overall pick, Golden State. All right, we want to play the New Orleans Pelicans. Come on. That would be awesome.
But it'd be for wrong reasons. We want to be like, I like that city because they got better entertainment.
Oh, come on. They're not doing that in the playoffs.
Okay.
That would, come on, man.
What about just the traditionalist view of it? Because I think because Adam Silver, and it's all ideas and speculation, it would still be the top 8 from the West and the top 8 from the East. But then you got the records in play, right?
So the one top, I think they're looking at all of it.
So the top overall. But what about, do you think it takes away all of these changes and advancements in the game? Do you think it takes away from the traditional view of how playoffs are run and the format of the playoffs?
No, I think that people will adjust. Because if you look at the way it is, we want to see the best basketball. And if we're just formulating a new format just to get the best teams on the court, like I think people will adjust to that. I don't think that there's as much East as there is West. There's not as much Lakers, Celtics as we're used to seeing. So I believe that we'll develop new rivalries. And if one conference is easier, then the case, they can't make the case that, wow, their record, they're playing easier teams. So they had a worse record, playing more games against because they're only going to the other conference for so many games. So I believe it will work itself out.
And what you don't want is consistently to have it feel like it did in the NFL in the 90s, where the biggest game was the conference championship game. For a long time in the 90s, it felt like the Super Bowl was the NFC championship game. And then it was the Super Bowl was a bit of a letdown. If LeBron goes to the Rockets or the Spurs and you don't reseed it, you will have the top 6 players in the league all in one conference. 9 of the top 11 all in one conference. Like, you've got to account for that. And I think that's one of the things they're trying to at least consider.
Welcome back to First Things First. A few weeks ago, LeBron and the Cavs were getting questions on whether they would even make the playoffs. Now, with a retooled roster, they are overwhelming Vegas favorites to come out of the East with 5-9 odds. The Raptors are behind them at 3-1, with the Celtics at 4-1. CC, what has to happen for the Cavs not to win the East?
Injury. I mean, man, they get injured. They can't afford no injury. I mean, that's the number one thing. And then, if you just look from a strategy standpoint, what if they get Philadelphia in the first round? That things are made tough for them round 1, round 2. I think they would beat Philadelphia, but that's an exciting matchup in round 1. So I think that the overall wear and tear, that they get a tough series 1 and 2 before they face teams I think that they're better than in the semifinals and finals, and injury. Like, they can't afford an injury, especially, we know, to LeBron, but I don't believe they can afford an injury to Kevin Love or one of their other top players that they just acquired.
All right, so I want to ask you about that because obviously an injury to LeBron would be catastrophic for this team, but we've never seen a LeBron injury, so if we say he's not going to get hurt, you think that if Kevin Love, if it came back, Kevin Love's hand didn't heal right, and he's out for the playoffs, like he's not coming back, you think that Cavs team could get beat in the East? You think that a non-LeBron injury could make someone else the favorite in the East?
Not the favorite. It says what happens if they don't win.
Okay.
This is what would have happened, okay? If it said what happened? They lost a player through an injury. Like, it's not a matter of being favored or not. If they lose a top player, they're not that talented they can afford to lose one of their players.
So I think people probably expect me to say nothing can derail the Cavs in the East. And I've said all year long when they were struggling, before Isaiah came back from injury, after Isaiah came back from injury, before the trades, after the trades, the Cavs are going to the finals because they have LeBron James. And the Eastern Conference has been known as the LeBron James Invitational for the better part of the last decade, and I will continue to believe that. But if you were to tell me they are going to get got, someone is going to beat them, I would not say Toronto, who's the second best odds. I would not say Boston, who is in a bit of a free fall after that 22-4 start. I would say the team that has the best chance to beat them is the team that right now would be their first-round matchup, and that's Milwaukee. And it's for 2 reasons. One is if they were to meet in the first round, Kevin Love's only going to have, 4 to 7 games with these new players getting reacclimated to the team, but also because of the guy we're showing right there. Giannis has played 3 games against the Cavs this year. Now, the Bucks have only won 1 of those games, but Giannis has averaged 34, 10, and 6. And the way to beat LeBron is to somehow either have overwhelming talent around him or have a series where he's not the best player on the court. It's been a long time since we've seen that, but you could see that for a week against Milwaukee. That's how special that guy is. So if the Cavs are going to get beaten, I would think it would have to be in the first round. I think it would have to be against a team such as Milwaukee. You mentioned Philly. I don't trust Philly's youth enough, but it would have to be something like that where Kevin Love...
You can't trust Milwaukee shooting. Like, they don't shoot the ball well enough to be able to beat the Cavs.
They don't shoot the ball well enough, but they're so long, and ever since Jason Kidd got fired, they've been better defensively that I think they could stymie to a degree the Cavs shooting.
Nick, in your mind, how much did that coaching change
I think it was
what
huge.
they can do?
I think it was huge. I think that Jason Kidd, from a strategic standpoint, was one of the worst coaches in the NBA. And I think he was holding that team back. And we're also now just seeing Milwaukee with Jabari Parker back for the first time. Eric Bledsoe's getting more indoctrinated in the lineup. Those guys had never played together. And so for those reasons, I think if you were to tell me this, let me put it like this, and I'm curious who you think the answer is. Cleveland doesn't come out of the East. Who does? My answer would be Milwaukee. Cleveland doesn't come out of the East, Chris Carter. Who does?
Toronto.
Toronto?
I just believe that their second unit has improved, the way they're playing offensive basketball, going to more of a motion, and DeRozan's ability to be able to shoot from three. I believe those are difference makers for Toronto. And also, this is the only team that I've seen that we just forget their home record. Like, when you're playing 82 games and you have the best record in the NBA at home in these series where Game 7 is definitely going to be on your home court, I'm going with Toronto.
I love what Toronto's done and the changes they've made. And I think a lot of times going into a season, teams talk about they're changing the offense, they're going through more motions, and it doesn't actually happen. I feel like it is legit. They're playing differently. DeMar DeRozan is a different level. Kyle Lowry is being as productive without having the ball in his hands as much. I'm not sure, though, they play that way in the playoffs. When it's a possession-by-possession playoff style, but I'm not sure they don't go back to the isolation ball we see, and it's not the same flow of their offense.
The home record is a great point. Also, if you care about point differential, which is a stat I care about a lot, they have the second-best point differential in the entire NBA. They have a better point differential than Golden State, despite having a worse record than Golden State. But because they have not been competitive against the Cavs in the playoffs, because they've needed 7 games to beat inferior teams in the playoffs, that's why people don't believe in them. You mentioned something, though. We're talking about how the Cavs can get beaten. If a team is going to beat them, assuming it's not in the first round, they are going to need help from the team the Cavs play in the round before. One of the reasons LeBron's been able to play 42 to 44 minutes a game in the playoffs since he's come back to Cleveland is in the 3 years he's been there prior to this year, they've never played more than 2 games over the minimum in the Eastern Conference.
Yes.
Every year they've swept 2 of their 4 series, and then the other series either gone 5 or 6. So you have enormous amounts of rest between series. You also never play back-to-backs. So, yeah, I mean, if a team could force the Cavs to go 7 in round 1, and LeBron maybe can't play 44 minutes a game in round 2, that's another method in order to beat them.
Are we underrating how easy it will be for Kevin Love to reacclimate himself with the new guys, with the team, and also play like he moved to that center spot, whether he's playing the 4 or the 5. I don't think Kevin Love loves playing at the center. I don't think he loves to get banged around on the inside, and that's a lineup they're going to use a lot. Do you think it's going to take more to get him readjusted with this new roster?
I think it's actually a break for Kevin, because if he is going to play the 5, which they are a better team with LeBron at the 4.
Absolutely.
But he's only got to play an abbreviated season. Now, he didn't like playing a whole season that way, but when you talk about a series, or, Kevin, this is the way you're going to get your second ring, all right? Like, you got to play. And the playoff games are totally different. You mentioned the rest that you have in between. So he's not getting isolated as much on a 5. But in these series, man, I'm sure Kevin Love would love to take on all of the 5s in the Eastern Conference. Bring them right out to the 3-point line, yo-yo them back and forth, to drive them to the bucket. Because that's a great matchup for the Cavaliers. So I believe that the adjustment is easier for Kevin because Kevin has made the biggest adjustments of anyone on the Cavs in playing with LeBron.
And Chris's point about everyone talks about when Love plays the 5, when they play the Miami Heat, Hassan Whiteside's got such a height advantage. Andre Drummond, Joel Embiid, we know that. But the flip side is, aside from Embiid, those other guys are just drawing dead guarding Love. And if you, with the new Cavs lineup, as CeCe's mentioned, like if you have George Hill, Rodney Hood, either Corver or JR or whomever's hot, plus Kevin Love, and you go LeBron up top, 4 out, that center's got to come out. Like, he's either got to leave the court or he's got to try to guard Kevin Love out on the perimeter, which is why that offense in particular, we haven't seen it yet with the trades, could be so deadly.
And even guarding these centers, the centers aren't dominant. They're going to go for 40 points. Like a 2 or 3 guard can when they get hot. So I think that the plus minuses really weigh in Cleveland's favor.
Conference, the Warriors are in unfamiliar territory, second place at the All-Star break. They trailed the Rockets, though, by just a half game. CeCe, can the Rockets legitimately knock off the Warriors?
Of course they can. Nick and I, last week, About 10 days ago. Yeah, we went to Brooklyn, your stomping grounds, to watch Houston up front. Nick introduced me to the owner and everything there of Houston. So we've been watching Houston under a microscope, Nick and I. Nick used to live in Houston. I'm a huge fan of Chris Paul, so seeing him come over, what would this team be like? And to see them evolve with him, Harden, and Capella, that combination being lethal, it's nice to see Houston. They're more than just a three-point shooting team. If you look at how they break down games in the fourth quarter, whether they did before isolation, Harden's gets fouled, but now they're moving the ball more. I believe that their plan to close out games is better, and their mental makeup is better. They got tougher players. PJ Tucker being added. It adds some grit to this team that we know is one of the best shooting teams. So you have to be able to match Golden State's shooting, but the grit that we know, and Golden State doesn't get a lot of credit for it, but we know they have it. I believe that they've gone out and acquired some of that.
So I want to talk about the Rockets. I'm glad we're going to talk about the Rockets right now because there are a couple things I think America just doesn't know about the Houston Rockets. They've played 29 games this year where James Harden, Chris Paul, and Clint Capella started. They are 28-1 in those 29 games. That is not a small sample size. That is not a fluke. That is a scary number. Here's another one. Basketball Reference has all-time NBA rankings as far as offensive efficiency. How good is your offense? The 2018 Houston Rockets rank number 1 in the history of basketball. That is not some crazy advanced metric. It's points per 100 possessions. Houston Rockets, the best team ever. And by the way, how good is that list? Well, number 2 is the 87 Lakers. Number 3 is last year's Warriors. Number 4 is the 92 Bulls. And number 5 is the 88 Celtics. Those are 4 of the greatest teams we have ever seen.
So the metrics aren't just kind of doctored up or swayed to the current game.
Exactly
you see that
right.
The metrics cross over different generations.
Exactly right. And so you take all that. You mention the lesser-known players. CeCe mentioned P.J. Tucker. He also was going to mention Luc Richard Mbah-a-Moute, but he doesn't like saying his name. And so
we knew who you were talking about.
The 2 guys that do not need you to run a single play for them, go out and get some defensive stops, and go out and add some grit to your team, as CeCe put it. You then add the fact that I know that everyone just likes to say, well, the Warriors, this could be the best Warriors team ever. Well, it could be, but 2/3 of the way through the season, we have no evidence of it. It is last year's Warriors team, I got it. They could have worse metrics than the previous year's team, and people were like, but they added Kevin Durant. They will be better. This is the same team as last year, just a year older, a year where they've all now won a championship, KD included, another year of a 100-game season on their bodies. And this Warriors team right now is not as good as last year's team. Maybe they will be, but they are scoring fewer points. They are allowing more points. Iguodala doesn't look as good. Livingston doesn't look as good. Draymond doesn't look as good. David West doesn't look as good.
Yes. Now, those players, especially the backup players, Draymond's a different conversation, but they look older. Livingston looks older. West looks older. Iggy, man, he needs to be at a higher level. I mean, we're not used to seeing him. Now, does he ramp it up as we get into May? Like, I don't know that, but I haven't seen it. And those are things that would bring into question, well, how good is Houston? I believe that Houston, this would be the best team that they have faced outside of the finals in the Western Conference. Even better than the OKC team that was up 3-1 that ended up losing 4-3.
So the other, I mean, you mentioned the other guys. One of the things that made the Warriors so deadly 2 years ago when they went 73-9, and also deadly last year was when they went to that lineup of death. There was not a guy, every single guy on the court had to be guarded at the three-point line. It was all 5 guys. You can't defend that. Like, you just can't, especially when 2 of them are Steph and Clay and then became Steph, Clay, and Durant. Well, right now, Draymond Green is shooting less than 30%. And Andre Iguodala right now is the worst three-point shooter in the league. And so when those things, again, I want to make this clear because I don't want people to say, oh, Nick, the Warriors are the favorites. Right. I get it. But the idea that they are, they can't be beaten, I don't buy it, especially when you look at the Rockets up and down the lineup. Now, issue with the Rockets is, what's the question about James Harden? How he performs in big spots. What's the question about Chris Paul? How he performs in big spots. What's the question about
in big spots?
Right, and their head coach. How does he perform
in
big
the system?
spots? Right.
The system in the
when
playoffs.
you get into playoffs, they start breaking it down where you can't get up and down the court as much. And one thing that I know that people don't know, watch, even though Houston is in the top 10 as far as defense efficiency, watch the shooting percentage that other teams shoot against them. Teams shoot well against them, actually shoot a better percentage than Houston shoots. So people are like, well, maybe it's because of the threes. Now, Golden State, on the other hand, they shoot 51%. Teams shoot 44%. So they get a lot of layups. So if you get into a series like that, I want to watch Houston's defense, how that defense matches up head-to-head against Golden State, because the percentage that they're giving up right now is a little bit too high.
And their depth. I mean, how much does Houston, you bring up Golden State Warriors and their bench, does the depth of the Rockets have that big of an impact considering rotations get shortened in the playoffs?
Well, so I think it has an impact in this regard. They don't, you know what one of the problems with Oklahoma City was? Even the year they were up 3-1, you only had 7 guys, and really you only had 4 you trusted.
Right.
It was, even if you're going to go a short rotation, you still got to play 5.
Right.
And at one point, Roberson was not, he was still a great defender, probably not as good as he was playing this year, but his shot was broken. It never got fixed, by the way. And so you were playing 4 and 5 on offense. The Rockets, while you're not going to play 9 guys, you've got to have 7 you really trust. And I think they have 8 they really trust. And so that does allow for, if Ariza misses a couple games in a series, maybe not a series against Golden State, but you can overcome that. And we haven't even mentioned Trevor Ariza.
Right.
He's a really good player.
Yes, and we haven't mentioned the players who can get you a bucket. You talk about the rotation going from 10 to 9, 9 from 8. But outside of your superstar players, I believe outside of Chris Paul and Harden, they have 4 or 5 other guys that, because of the way they run their offense, they can get a bucket because they're going to get a shot and they will shoot it. That's where I believe that they have an advantage over the teams that have previously faced Golden State in the Western Conference.
Hey, everybody, Nick Wright here, and thank you so much for listening to the First Things First podcast. But I wanted to tell you about another podcast at Fox Sports that we are so excited about, and that is Alexi Lalas's State of the Union podcast. That's right, U.S. soccer legend Alexi Lalas will be partnering up with Fox soccer guru and researcher extraordinaire David Moss to review the top storylines in soccer across the globe. Each week, Alexi will give his State of the Union on American soccer as it rebuilds for the future. Subscribe and listen for free on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts right now. Now back to the show.
It's time for In or Out. The new All-Star Game format with players choosing teams seemed to pay off. This game was competitive all the way to the last shot. CC, are you in or out on the new All-Star Game format being a success?
I'm totally in because it's more entertaining. The fans, we as fans, like, we win. The All-Star weekend, we know it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but we forget about the game for the most part. It's anticlimactic. Now they bring it back into focus. They need to play a little bit harder. Don't want this to be like the Pro Bowl. So I'm glad they made the adjustment.
I'm totally in on this. And people were worried, well, if they play harder, are guys going to get hurt? And I admit, I watched the game.
People need to stop saying that. And you know who says that? People who never play.
All right, well, that's
oh, my God, I'm worried about getting hurt. When you going to work today, there's a better probability of you getting hurt than a pro athlete going hard in a competition.
Well, I understand why in football games you don't want to play any extra full contact football games because it takes so much out of you and because the risk of injury is so high.
You actually risk more injury when you don't know the speed of the competition compared to being able to gauge a guy coming at full speed, either that being football or basketball.
So I loved it. I thought it was awesome, and the ending was great.
All right, moving on to a breakout star. Last night, Joel Embiid had 19 points, 8 rebounds in his first All-Star game. Nick, are you in or out on Embiid joining the ranks of the top tier of the NBA players?
I am in. I've been a guy that's felt that Embiid's been a little overhyped given just he played 31 career games headed into this season. I wanted to see more from him. I wanted to see if he could stay healthy. Thus far this year, he's stayed healthy. He's been a terror on both ends of the court. And seeing him yesterday when they were trying to, I thought foolishly, get switches out on him. Man, he can guard you out at the top and stay with you to the rim as he did to Paul George, as you see him doing to Russell Westbrook. I thought Embiid was awesome, and seeing him out there against the best of the best, I thought was great.
Yeah, he's a tremendous talent. All we could say is, man, he's going to get injured, or man, I don't want him to get hurt, or man, I wonder what he's going to be like in a full sample size, because that's all we have to go on. But what we've seen, man, he is a brilliant basketball player. He has the skill level, shooting from three-point range, inside game, has the type of footwork, and has that rare personality where he's going to be able to add something to a telecast or to social media. So he is a breath of fresh air as far as the modern-day athlete. I'm glad to see someone like him who's totally different.
CeCe, of all the young guys in the league, 24 and under, I think Giannis is the only one I'd rather have than Embiid. I'd rather have him than Karl Anthony Towns, any of the rookies this year, Simmons, any of them. I think Embiid's the number one guy after Giannis.
What about the Brow?
Brow's the year older. Brow's 25 now. So okay, Brow, Giannis, and Embiid if we're going to include
Would you go Giannis Brow? Or
yes, Giannis Brow, Embiid if we're going to include.
And I'm going to get him waxed. European wax. We're going to get a national deal. Get that
you
thing.
You keep saying that. It's his brand, man.
There is no, you know what his brand is? His game. Okay? Because if he didn't have a game, would you know him?
What? No, but the Brow helps. We
I
disagree
like him.
on
He's
this
a Chicago kid. All right, next up, LeVar Ball had some interesting words for LeBron James coming to the Lakers. When asked if LeBron would make Lonzo better, LeVar said Lonzo would make LeBron better. CeCe, are you in or out on Lonzo one day being able to make LeBron better?
No, I'm totally not. I'm out on listening to the dad. When are we going to get a soundbite from him and be like, you know something, that's crazy? Oh, we'll put that with the rest of them. Well, stop. Next thing you know what's missing from LeBron James' career?
What?
LeVar Ball coaching him. That's what he need to be. He need to be coached by me. He ain't seen no coach like me. He ain't never had no great coach. Let me coach him up. I'll make him better. With all them stats he's got, like 2.3 points in college. All right? What were your college numbers? What were your college numbers?
Oh, I don't remember these things.
Was it more than 2.3 points?
Yes.
Thank you, because I knew that. Come on, you got to know your own. That's why they keeping track. That Nick will tell you that. Like, you got to keep track of the numbers.
Exactly right. And you got to make sure everyone around you knows the numbers. And can Lonzo one day help LeBron? I'm going to be out unless LeVar was talking about LeBron James Jr.
Man, go.
Now, Bronny in 6 years, when Lonzo's a 7-year pro, maybe that LeBron James, Lonzo can help. But LeBron James Sr., nah, man.
You know what he's yelling at him then? You know your daddy wasn't done. I watched your daddy. I would have took your daddy to the hole. You know your daddy wasn't none. Your little baby boy, your other brother, he ain't gonna be no good either.
CeCe, you do a good impression of LeVar.
Well, it's a lot of bad then. Big bad.
We've been hearing too much from him. To the NFL, Vikings' new offensive coordinator, John DeFilippo, says Kirk Cousins is, quote, a heck of a football player. Nick, are you in or out on Kirk Cousins being the Vikings' best option at
I'm
QB?
out only because of the salary cap ramifications. He's obviously the best quarterback available, but if you sign him this year, next offseason, you are going to have to get rid of or let walk a lot of those key defensive players that made you who you were this year. So because of the salary cap, I am out.
One reason why the Vikings got rid of Adrian Peterson, they didn't want to be a one-star team. They are a team that's driven by the young talent that they've drafted and cultivated. They can get 2 quarterbacks for the price of Cousins. I'm out.
All right, finally, to baseball. Tim Tebow will be back for the Mets in spring training, but GM Sandy Alderson has much grander plans for the former football star. Alderson says he thinks Tebow will play in the major leagues. CeCe, are you in or out on Tim Tebow making the majors someday?
I got to say that I'm in.
Wow.
Well, I mean, now, if they have him throw the ball, I'm out. But as long as he can catch it or hit it, but if he decides to throw it, that's what Tim Tebow, that's his only problem, is when that motion, when that ball leaves his hand. Besides that, I mean, if the general manager, which is very, very important, if you got the general manager in your job saying that potentially you think he wants to be wrong? Or you think he's going to be swaying it towards being correct? So I'm going to go with the expert in this one, and he's the guy making the decisions. Tebow will end up in the major leagues.
Wow, I'm out. I root for Tim Tebow. I think he's a good guy. He wasn't a good football player, but
if you're rooting for him, how would you be out then?
Because I can root for someone, still don't think it's going to happen. I would like it to happen. I don't believe it will happen. Man, baseball is such a specific skill, and hitting a baseball is the hardest thing to do in pro sports, hitting it consistently. I just don't think a guy who's picking it up, I know he played last year, but prior to that, after
you only got to be able to get
off,
2 hits out of 10.
Does it count if he's called up for a game or two?
He would need 3 out of 10.
There's guys hitting 200 in the majors.
Not guys, but those guys didn't hit 200 in the minors. You got to hit 3 out of 10 in the minors to have a chance to hit 2 out of 10 in the majors. I just don't think he's going to do it. I hope he does. I don't think he's going to.